Richard Hayes smiled as he pressed send on the final message. The phone in his gloved hand wasn't his. It belonged to a man sitting in a restaurant across town, a man laughing with business partners, lifting a glass of red wine, completely unaware that his life was already over. Every word Richard typed would look like it came from Daniel Carter. Every threat would make the police believe a devoted husband had become a monster. And the most beautiful part, Richard thought as he set the phone down gently, was that Daniel would never see it coming, not until it was far, far too late. Before we go any further into this story, I want to ask you something. If you enjoy stories about betrayal, secrets, and the fight to save the people we love, please subscribe to this channel and stay with me all the way to the end. And leave a comment telling me what city you are watching from so I can see just how far this story has traveled tonight. Now, let us begin. Daniel Carter had no idea that the worst night of his life had already started. He was sitting at a long table in the back of a steakhouse, surrounded by the men who had built their careers alongside him. The waiter had just refilled his glass. Someone had told a joke about the mayor. The whole table was laughing, and Daniel was laughing too, and for one warm and ordinary moment, he felt something close to peace. His firm had just secured the largest contract in its history, a $12 million bridge project, 2 years of work, guaranteed. It was the kind of deal that changed a man's future, and Daniel had worked 18 years to earn a night like this. Across the table, Richard Hayes raised his glass. "To Daniel," Richard said, his voice smooth and generous, "the best engineer I have ever worked with, and the most honest man in this city." The table cheered. Daniel felt his cheeks flush. "You're going to make me cry, Richard," Daniel said. "And I don't cry in front of clients." "You've earned every bit of it," Richard said warmly. "I mean that." Daniel believed him. That was the thing that would haunt him later, in the darkest hours of the coming days. He believed every single word Richard Hayes said. The two men had known each other for 9 years. Richard had brought Daniel into the firm when it was small and struggling. They had shared hotel rooms on business trips, celebrated birthdays together, stood beside each other at funerals. Richard had been the best man at almost nobody's wedding, but he had been there for Daniel's, standing at the altar with a hand on Daniel's shoulder, whispering, "You found a good one. Don't ever let her go." Daniel had listened to that advice. He had loved Emily for 12 years, and tonight, sitting in that restaurant, he had no idea that Richard was the reason she was already gone. "I should call Emily," Daniel said, patting his pockets. His face changed. "Oh no." "What is it?" one of the partners asked. "My phone," Daniel said. "I left it charging on the kitchen counter. I walked out without it." The partner laughed. "So you actually have to talk to human beings for one whole evening. Terrible." "You have no idea," Daniel said, smiling. "I feel naked. I don't think I've been without that thing in years." Richard leaned back in his chair, and for just a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. If Daniel had been looking closely, he might have seen it. A small, quiet satisfaction. But Daniel was not looking. Daniel was reaching for a bread roll and asking the waiter about dessert. "You know," Richard said slowly, "it's probably good for you. A man should be able to disappear for a few hours. Nobody should be able to reach you every second of the day." "Emily says the same thing," Daniel admitted. "She's always telling me to put it down at dinner." "Smart woman," Richard said. "How is she, by the way? Emily?" Daniel hesitated. It was a strange hesitation, one he did not fully understand at the time. Something in Richard's tone had shifted, just slightly, too casual, too careful. "She's fine," Daniel said. "Busy. She's been working late a lot lately. I'm not sure what on." "Late nights," Richard repeated. "You should keep an eye on that." "What's that supposed to mean?" Richard raised both hands, laughing gently. "Nothing. Nothing at all. I'm just an old man who worries about his friends. Forget I said anything." Daniel let it go. He always let things go with Richard. That was the pattern of 9 years, the habit of trust worn deep into him like a groove. He would remember this conversation later and feel physically sick, because he would finally understand that Richard had been watching his face, measuring his suspicion, testing how much Daniel knew. The answer was nothing. Daniel knew nothing, and that was exactly how Richard wanted it. The dinner went on for another 2 hours. Daniel ate too much. He laughed until his stomach hurt. He shook hands with clients and promised them the finest bridge in the state. And the entire time, in a dark house on a quiet street, his wife's suitcase sat open on the bedroom floor, half-packed, abandoned in the middle of something terrible. At 10:40 in the evening, Daniel finally said goodnight. "Get home safe," Richard told him, pulling him into a warm embrace. "And Daniel, whatever happens, remember I'm always on your side." Daniel laughed. "Whatever happens? You make it sound so dramatic." "Do I?" Richard said, smiling. "Old habit. Good night, my friend." Daniel drove home with the radio on, and the windows cracked open. He felt good. He felt lucky. He thought about waking Emily up to tell her about the contract, about the promotion that would come with it, about the vacation they could finally take. He imagined her sleepy smile, the way she would pretend to be annoyed at being woken and then pull him close anyway. He had no idea he was driving toward the ruin of everything. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway. That was not unusual. Emily often went to bed early, but when Daniel stepped out of the car, he felt something in the air that he could not name. A stillness, a wrongness, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. "Emily?" he called, unlocking the front door. "Em, I'm home. You will not believe the night I had." No answer. "Emily?" He flipped the light switch. The living room looked normal, almost normal, but something was off, and his eyes moved across the room searching for it, the way an animal senses a predator before it sees one. Her coat was gone from the hook by the door. "Em?" His voice was quieter now. "Are you here?" He walked toward the kitchen, and that was when he saw it. A wine glass shattered on the tile floor. Red wine spread across the white tiles like something worse. A kitchen chair knocked over on its side, and near the counter, a smear on the floor, dark and dragged, as though something heavy had been pulled across it. "Emily!" Daniel shouted now, his heart slamming against his ribs. "Emily, where are you?" He ran through the house. He threw open the bedroom door. The suitcase was there, half-packed, clothes spilling out of it. Her jewelry box was open. But Emily was not there. The bathroom was empty. The guest room was empty. The garage was empty, though her car was still in it, which meant she had not driven anywhere. She had not left. Someone had taken her. Daniel stood in the middle of his bedroom and felt the world tilt beneath him. His hands were shaking. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. He told himself to think, to be calm, to be the rational man he had always been. But rational men do not come home to broken glass and blood on the floor and an empty house where their wife should be. "Phone," he whispered to himself. "Call her. Call her phone." He ran to the kitchen counter where he had left his own phone charging that morning. His hands were trembling so hard he nearly dropped it. He pressed the button and the screen lit up, and for a second the brightness blinded him. Then he saw the notifications, and everything inside him went cold and still. There were dozens of them, text messages, all from earlier that evening, all showing as sent from his phone. Daniel opened them, and his blood turned to ice. The messages were to Emily. "You think you can walk out on me? You have no idea what I'm capable of. If you leave, you will regret it for the rest of your very short life. I know what you found. Did you really think I wouldn't? You should have kept your mouth shut, Emily." Daniel stared at the screen, and a sound came out of him that he did not recognize as his own voice. A low, broken groan. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no. I didn't send these. I didn't. I wasn't even here." He scrolled up, his thumb shaking. The messages had been sent between 8 and 9 in the evening, every one of them. During those exact hours, Daniel had been sitting in a restaurant surrounded by 6 business partners, a waiter, and half a dining room full of witnesses. He had not touched his phone. His phone had been sitting right here, on this counter, in this house. And yet the messages had been sent. From his phone, to his wife, threatening her life. Daniel gripped the edge of the counter to keep from falling. His mind raced through impossible explanations. Maybe Emily had sent them to herself somehow. Maybe there had been a mistake. Maybe he was dreaming. But the broken glass on the floor was real. The dragged smear was real. The empty house was real. Someone had been in his home tonight. Someone had used his phone. Someone had written these words in his name. "Think," he told himself, his voice cracking. "Daniel, think." He tried to call Emily. The line rang once and went straight to a dead silence. He tried again. Nothing. He tried a third time, and this time it did not even ring. It was as if her phone had been switched off or destroyed. "Come on, Em," he begged. "Pick up, please, please pick up." His hands were slick with sweat. He set the phone down, then picked it up again, then set it down. His whole body did not know what to do with the terror flooding through it. He should call the police. That was the obvious thing. His wife was gone. There were signs of a struggle. He needed help. But even in his panic, a small and terrible voice at the back of his mind whispered a warning. The messages. If the police saw those messages, they would not see a frightened husband. They would see a suspect. "But I didn't do it," Daniel said out loud to the empty kitchen. "I didn't do anything. I have witnesses. I was at dinner. Everyone saw me." He was right. He did have witnesses. But he had not yet learned the cruelest truth of that night, which was that Richard Hayes had planned for the witnesses too. Richard had wanted Daniel at that dinner. Richard had made sure Daniel was surrounded by people who could confirm exactly where he was, because a man with an airtight alibi and a phone full of threats does not look innocent to the police. He looks like a man clever enough to build himself an alibi. Daniel did not understand this yet. He only knew that he was afraid, and that his wife was gone, and that his own phone had betrayed him. He picked it up one more time and with shaking fingers dialed the emergency number. 911, what is your emergency? "My wife," Daniel said, and his voice broke completely. "My wife is gone. I came home from dinner and she's gone. There's broken glass. There's blood, I think, on the floor. And her suitcase is here, but she's not. Please send someone." "Sir, I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me your address?" Daniel gave it. His voice shook the entire time. "Officers are on their way. Sir, is there anyone else in the home with you right now?" No, I'm alone. I just got home. I was at a business dinner all night. I have witnesses. I wasn't even here when it happened." The dispatcher paused. It was only half a second of silence, but Daniel heard it, and it terrified him. He was already defending himself. He was already saying he wasn't here, already listing his witnesses, and no one had accused him of anything yet. "Just stay on the line with me, sir," the dispatcher said. "Help is coming." Daniel sank to the floor of his kitchen, his back against the cabinet, his phone pressed to his ear. He looked at the broken glass a few feet away. He looked at the dark smear on the tile, and he thought about Emily. He thought about the way she had kissed him goodbye that morning, distracted, her mind clearly somewhere else. He thought about how she had been quiet at breakfast, how she had barely touched her coffee, how she had jumped when the doorbell rang. He had asked her what was wrong. She had said, "Nothing, I'm just tired." He had believed her. He had been so busy with the contract, so wrapped up in his own good news, that he had let it go. He had let everything go, the way he always did. And now she was gone. "Emily," he whispered into the empty house. "What did you find? What did you get into? Why didn't you tell me?" Somewhere in the back of his mind, pieces were beginning to move. Emily's late nights, her nervousness, the way she had started locking her laptop when he walked into the room, the strange phone calls she took in the other room, her voice dropping to a whisper. He had told himself it was work stress. He had told himself 100 comfortable lies because the truth was too frightening to look at. Now the truth was standing in his kitchen, and it was covered in broken glass. Daniel heard the sirens before he saw the lights. They grew louder and louder until red and blue flashes filled the windows of his home. He got to his feet, wiped his face, and walked to the front door on legs that barely held him. 2 officers stepped out of the first car. A third vehicle pulled up behind them. And from that third car stepped a man in a long coat, a man who moved slowly and deliberately, a man whose eyes swept across Daniel's face and the house and the driveway all in a single practiced glance. "Daniel Carter?" the man said. Yes, that's me. Please, my wife, you have to find her. Someone took her." "My name is Detective Michael Reynolds," the man said, extending a hand that Daniel shook without thinking. "I'm going to help you tonight, but I need you to answer some questions first. Can you do that?" "Anything," Daniel said. "Anything you need." Reynolds stepped into the house. His eyes moved to the kitchen immediately, to the broken glass, to the smear on the floor. He did not react. He simply looked and absorbed and filed everything away. "Tell me where you've been tonight," Reynolds said. "A business dinner at the steakhouse on 5th. I was there from about 7 until 10:40. There were 6 other people with me, partners from my firm. I can give you every name. The waiter will remember me. I signed the check with my card. It'll have a timestamp." Reynolds nodded slowly. "That's a very detailed alibi, Mr. Carter." Daniel's stomach dropped. He heard it in Reynolds' voice, the faint edge of suspicion, the same edge he had heard in the dispatcher's silence. I'm not trying to build an alibi," Daniel said quickly. "I'm just telling you where I was. Because whoever did this, they weren't me. I couldn't have done this. I wasn't here." "Nobody has accused you of anything," Reynolds said calmly. "But you're thinking it," Daniel said, and his voice cracked. "I can see it. You're looking at me the way everybody looks at the husband. But I love my wife. I would never hurt her. Never. You have to believe me." Reynolds studied him for a long moment. His face gave away nothing. "Mr. Carter," he said, "why don't you show me your phone?" The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He had known this moment was coming. He had dreaded it from the second he saw those messages. But there was no way to avoid it, because a man with nothing to hide does not refuse to show the police his phone. Slowly, Daniel reached into his pocket. His hand was shaking so badly that Reynolds noticed, and his eyes narrowed just slightly. "Before I show you," Daniel said, "I need you to understand something. There are messages on here, messages that look like I sent them. But I didn't. I swear to you on my life I didn't send them. I wasn't even in the house when they were sent. My phone was here charging, and I was at the restaurant. You can check. You have to check." Reynolds held out his hand and said nothing. Daniel placed the phone in the detective's palm. He watched Reynolds' face as the detective scrolled through the messages. He watched the detective's jaw tighten, watched his eyes flick up once, briefly, to look at Daniel, then back down to the screen. Every message was worse than the last. Every message painted Daniel as a man who had threatened his wife, who had known she was leaving, who had promised she would regret it. "These were sent tonight," Reynolds said, "between 8 and 9. "Yes. While you say you were at dinner." "I was at dinner. I swear I was. Call the restaurant. Call my partners. I never touched my phone. It was right here on this counter the whole time." Reynolds looked up at him. "Then how," the detective said slowly, "did these messages get sent, Mr. Carter?" And Daniel Carter, standing in his own kitchen, surrounded by police, his wife gone, his phone full of threats he never wrote, opened his mouth to answer. But he had no answer, because he did not know. "I don't know," Daniel whispered. "I don't know. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Someone did this to me. Someone used my phone. Someone wanted it to look like I did this. Please, you have to believe me. My wife is out there somewhere, and every minute we stand here is a minute she's in danger. Please." Reynolds did not answer right away. He turned and looked around the kitchen again, at the glass, at the smear, at the overturned chair. Then he looked back at Daniel, and for the first time, something in his expression shifted. Not belief, not yet, but something. A small crack of doubt, of curiosity, of a detective's instinct that told him this scene was too clean, too perfect, too convenient. "Mr. Carter," Reynolds said, "I've been doing this job for 22 years. And in my experience, when everything points to one man this clearly, this quickly, this neatly, it's usually because someone wanted it to." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, a single thread of hope. "Then you believe me?" "I didn't say that," Reynolds said. "I said I've got questions. And right now, so do you. So let's both start asking them. Starting with this. Who would want to hurt your wife? And who would want you to take the blame for it?" Daniel opened his mouth. The first name that came to his mind was a name he did not expect, a name that surprised even himself. A name he immediately dismissed because it was impossible, because that man was his oldest friend, because that man had hugged him goodnight 2 hours ago and told him he was always on his side. But the name would not leave him. Richard. "I don't know," Daniel said, and he was lying, and he did not even understand why he was lying, except that some part of him could not bear to say the name out loud. "I don't know who would do this." Reynolds watched him carefully. "You just thought of someone." "No. Mr. Carter." "I said I don't know," Daniel repeated, more firmly than he meant to. Reynolds let it go for now, but he made a note in his mind, the way good detectives do, that Daniel Carter had thought of a name and swallowed it back down. That would matter later. Everything mattered later. "We're going to search the house," Reynolds said. "We're going to look at your financials, your phone records, your car, your movements. If you're innocent, that will help you. If you're not, it will find you. Do you understand?" "Search everything," Daniel said. "I have nothing to hide. Just find Emily. Please, just find my wife." But Daniel did have something to hide, though he did not know it yet. Buried in his financial records was a hidden account, opened in his name, funded with money he had never seen, designed for one purpose only: to make it look like Daniel had been planning something, to make it look like a man preparing to make his wife disappear. Richard had thought of everything. As the officers spread through the house, as flashlights swept over the broken glass and gloved hands bagged the evidence, Daniel sat on his own couch and stared at nothing. He thought about the words in those messages. He thought about one line in particular, one line that had struck him harder than all the others. "I know what you found. Did you really think I wouldn't?" What had Emily found? She had been investigating something. He was certain of it now. The late nights, the secret calls, the locked laptop. She had found something dangerous, something worth killing for, something worth destroying a man's entire life to cover up. And whoever she found it out about had taken her. And that same person had made sure Daniel would spend the rest of his life in a prison cell, blamed for a crime he did not commit. Daniel closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw Richard's face, smiling, raising a glass, saying the honest man in this city. "Whatever happens," Richard had said, "remember, I'm always on your side." Daniel's eyes snapped open. Why would a man say that? Why would a man at a celebration dinner on the happiest night of Daniel's career say something so strange? Whatever happens, as if he knew something was about to happen, as if he had already set it in motion. Daniel's heart began to pound for a different reason now. Not fear. Something colder, something that felt almost like understanding. He looked up. Detective Reynolds was standing across the room, watching him. "Detective," Daniel said quietly, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to all of it before you decide I'm crazy." Reynolds pulled a chair over and sat down across from him. "I'm listening," he said, and Daniel Carter, in the ruins of his ordinary life, began to speak. He did not know if the detective would believe him. He did not know if anyone would ever believe him. He only knew that somewhere out there, in the cold and the dark, his wife was still alive, and that he was the only person in the world who could save her, if he could just make one person believe the truth. The truth that the honest man in this city was not the one sitting in this kitchen. The truth that the real monster had smiled and raised a glass and walked away into the night, certain that his perfect crime would never be undone. Daniel took a breath, and he began to tell Detective Reynolds about a man named Richard Hayes. And in an office across town, that same man sat alone in the dark, watching a small blinking light on a screen, a light that told him exactly where Daniel Carter was and what he was doing. Richard smiled to himself in the glow of the monitor. He picked up a glass of wine, the same red he had toasted with 2 hours before, and he raised it once more, this time to no one at all. "To you, Daniel," he said softly, "the honest man. Let's see how long that lasts." And he drank. The name hung in the air between them like smoke. "Richard Hayes," Detective Reynolds repeated slowly, writing it in his small notebook. "Your business partner." "My partner?" "My friend. The man who built the firm I work for." Daniel's voice was unsteady. "The man who hugged me 2 hours ago and told me he was always on my side. And I know how this sounds, Detective. I know I sound like a man who's grasping at anything to save himself. But you asked me who would want to hurt Emily and frame me, and there's only one man in the world with the money, the access, and the reason to do it. And it's him." Reynolds looked up from his notebook. "What reason?" Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again, because that was the problem. He didn't have the reason. Not yet. He only had a feeling, a cold certainty in his gut, and a strange goodbye that would not stop echoing in his head. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know exactly why, but Emily found something. She's been investigating something for weeks, late nights, secret phone calls. She started locking her laptop when I came into the room. I asked her about it, and she said it was work. I let it go. God help me, I let it go." His hands closed into fists on his knees. And whatever she found, it had to do with the company. It had to. Because those messages said, "I know what you found." Did you really think I wouldn't? Someone was afraid of what she discovered. Afraid enough to do this. Reynolds studied him for a long, silent moment. Then he closed his notebook. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to be honest with you, because I think you can handle it, and because it might be the only thing that saves your life in the next few days." He leaned forward. "Right now, everything in this house points at you. The messages came from your phone. There are signs of a struggle in your kitchen. Your wife is missing. And you have an alibi so perfect that any prosecutor in this state would tell a jury it proves you hired someone to do the dirty work while you sat in a restaurant making sure a dozen people saw your face." Daniel felt the blood drain from him. "But that's insane. That's backwards. My alibi is real." "I believe it's real," Reynolds said. "That's the strange part. 22 years I've done this. I've watched 1,000 guilty men lie to my face. You're not lying. Or you're the best I've ever seen." He stood up. "But what I believe doesn't matter. What I can prove matters. And right now I can't prove a single thing that helps you. So here's what's going to happen. My people are going to search this house. We're going to look at your car, your accounts, your phone records, all of it. And you're going to sit right there and let us. Because the moment you resist, you become the man who has something to hide." "Search everything," Daniel said hoarsely. "I told you, I have nothing to hide." He was wrong. He just didn't know it yet. For the next 3 hours, Daniel sat on his couch and watched strangers dismantle his life. They photographed the broken glass. They swabbed the dark smear on the tile, and Daniel heard one of them murmur the word blood, and something inside him cracked and went cold. They dusted the counters. They bagged Emily's toothbrush, her hairbrush, the coffee mug she'd left in the sink that morning. They took his laptop. They took his tablet. They took the phone that had betrayed him, sealing it in a plastic bag like a dead thing. And through all of it, Daniel kept his eyes on the front door, waiting, absurdly, for Emily to walk through it, for this to be a mistake, for her to come home from a friend's house and ask him why there were police in the kitchen. She didn't come home. At 2 a.m, a young officer approached Reynolds and spoke to him in a low voice Daniel couldn't hear. But he saw Reynolds' face change. He saw the detective's eyes flick toward him, and he knew, with the sick instinct of a drowning man, that they had found something. "Mr. Carter," Reynolds said, crossing the room, "I need you to explain a bank account." Daniel blinked. "What account?" "An account in your name, opened 4 months ago at a bank you don't use. There's a substantial amount of money in it. Cash deposits, structured to stay under the reporting limit." Reynolds watched his face like a hawk. "You want to tell me about that?" "I don't have any account like that." Daniel's voice rose. "I don't. I have my checking, my savings, my retirement. That's it. I don't know anything about cash deposits or another bank. I've never even walked into that bank." "It's in your name, your social security number, your date of birth." "Then somebody put it there. Somebody opened it as me." Daniel was on his feet now, his heart hammering. "Don't you see what's happening? This is exactly what I told you. Somebody is building a case against me. Somebody wanted you to find that account. Just like they wanted you to find those messages. It's all part of it. It's all designed to make me look like a man who planned this." Reynolds didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. He just looked at Daniel with those flat, patient eyes and said, "Or you're a man who planned this." "I would never hurt Emily," Daniel said, and his voice broke apart in the middle of her name. "She's everything to me. 12 years. Do you understand? 12 years. I've loved that woman. I would tear this whole city apart with my bare hands to find her. And you're standing here asking me about a bank account I've never seen." For the first time all night, something in Reynolds' expression softened. Just slightly. Just for a second. "Sit down, Mr. Carter," he said, not unkindly. "You're going to make yourself sick." Daniel sat. His whole body was shaking now, the adrenaline finally turning on him, leaving him hollow and cold. Reynolds sat across from him again. "I'm not arresting you tonight," he said. "I want you to understand that's a decision I'm making, and it's not a popular one. My captain is going to ask me why. The DA is going to ask me why, and the honest answer is, I don't know why. My gut says something's wrong here. Something's too neat. And I've learned to trust my gut, even when it makes my life harder." He paused. but my gut isn't evidence, so I need you to help me. I need you to give me something real, something I can chase that isn't just a feeling about your old friend. Emily's investigation, Daniel said immediately. Whatever she was working on, if we can find it, we find the reason. We find who did this. Where would she keep it? Daniel thought. His mind raced through the house, through Emily's habits, her hiding places, the small private corners of a woman he suddenly realized he had not been paying enough attention to. Her laptop, he said. But you took it. Or wait, she has another one, a little one. She bought it a couple months ago, and I never thought anything of it. She said her work one was too slow. She kept it in her car sometimes, or in her bag. I don't know where it is now. We didn't find a second laptop in the house, Reynolds said, and his eyes narrowed. Or in her car, or in... The two men looked at each other, and the same thought arrived in both of them at the same moment. Whoever took Emily had taken the laptop too, which meant whoever took Emily knew exactly what was on it. My brother, Daniel said suddenly. What? Ryan. My brother Ryan, he does cybersecurity. He works for a firm that handles digital forensics, network security, all of it. If someone got into my phone remotely, if someone sent those messages without touching it, Ryan can prove it. He can find the fingerprint. There's always a fingerprint, that's what he always says. Nobody does anything on a device without leaving a trail. For the first time, Reynolds looked genuinely interested. You're saying your brother can prove the messages weren't sent by you? I'm saying if anyone on Earth can, it's him. Please, let me call him. Let him look at the phone or a copy of it, or whatever you need to do to keep it clean for evidence. But let him look, because I'm telling you, Detective, that phone is the key to all of this. Someone reached into my life from a distance and used my own device to destroy me. And there is a trail. There has to be. Reynolds was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded, slowly. I'll have the phone imaged, a forensic copy. Your brother can examine the copy with one of my people present under supervision. If he finds what you say he'll find, it changes everything. He stood. And if he doesn't, it buries you deeper. You understand that? He'll find it, Daniel said. Just let him look. Let him. It was nearly 4 a.m. when the last of the police cars pulled out of Daniel's driveway. He stood in the doorway of his ruined home and watched the taillights disappear down the street. Then he closed the door and he sank to the floor with his back against it, and for the first time since he'd walked in and found the broken glass, he let himself fall apart. He cried for Emily. He cried for the 12 years. He cried for the version of his life that had ended the moment he'd walked out the door without his phone. And somewhere in the middle of that grief, a hard, cold thing began to form inside him, a thing that felt almost like purpose. He would find her, whatever it cost, whatever it took. He would find his wife, and he would find the man who did this, and he would make him pay. He picked up the landline, the old one Emily had insisted on keeping for emergencies, the one he'd always teased her about. His hands were shaking as he dialed his brother's number from memory. Ryan answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. Danny, it's 4 a.m. What's wrong? Ryan, Daniel's voice cracked. Emily's gone. Somebody took her, and they're trying to make it look like I did it. I need you right now. There was a pause. Then Ryan's voice came back, wide awake and sharp. I'm on my way. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone else. And Danny, whatever you do, don't sign anything the police put in front of you until I'm there. I'm coming. Ryan Carter arrived at dawn, unshaven, a laptop bag slung over his shoulder, his face pale with worry. He was 6 years younger than Daniel, softer around the edges, a man who had spent his whole life in front of screens rather than out in the world. But he was also the smartest person Daniel had ever known, and right now he was the only ally Daniel had. The brothers embraced in the doorway, and Ryan held on longer than usual. Tell me everything, Ryan said. From the beginning. Don't leave anything out. So Daniel told him. The dinner, the forgotten phone, the empty house, the broken glass, the blood, the messages that had been sent while he sat surrounded by witnesses, the account he'd never opened, the detective who almost, but not quite, believed him, and the name he could not stop thinking about, Richard Hayes. Ryan listened without interrupting. When Daniel finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Okay, first things first, the messages. You said the police are giving me a copy of the phone? A forensic image. Reynolds is arranging it. But Ryan, that could take days. Emily doesn't have days. Whoever has her, they might already have... He couldn't finish. Don't! Ryan said sharply. Don't go there. She's alive. If they wanted her dead, they wouldn't have staged all this. Think about it, Danny. Why frame you? Why the account? Why the messages? Why the whole production? If she was dead, they'd just dump the body and let the cops find it. This much effort means they need her for something, or they need you convicted for something. Either way, she's leverage, and you don't kill your leverage. The logic was cold, but it was a lifeline, and Daniel grabbed it with both hands. Then how do we find her? Ryan pulled his own laptop out of the bag and set it on the kitchen table, carefully avoiding the tape the police had left around the broken glass. We don't wait for Reynolds. We can't, so we do this the fast way. Your phone syncs to a cloud account, right? Your backups, your location history, your messages, all of it mirrors to the cloud. The police have the physical phone. But you and I have the account, and the account has everything the phone has. Daniel stared at him. I never thought of that. That's why you called me. Ryan's fingers were already flying across the keys. What's your password? Daniel gave it to him. Ryan typed it in, and then he frowned. That's weird. What? Your password's been changed. Recently. 3 days ago. Ryan looked up. Did you change your password 3 days ago? The kitchen went very quiet. No, Daniel said slowly. I didn't. Ryan's jaw tightened. Then someone did. Someone got into your account, changed the password, and locked you out of your own digital life 3 days before Emily disappeared. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing, Danny. Whoever did this was inside your accounts for days, maybe longer. They were watching you, learning you, waiting. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. 3 days ago. 3 days ago, he'd had dinner with Richard. 3 days ago, Richard had asked him, casually, so casually, how things were going, whether he'd been having any trouble with his devices, whether he'd thought about upgrading his security. Daniel had laughed and said he could barely remember his own passwords. Richard had smiled and said, You should really let me set you up with something better. I worry about you. I worry about you. Ryan, Daniel said, and his voice had gone strange. Richard offered to fix my security 3 days ago. He offered to set up my passwords, my accounts, everything. Said he was worried about me. I told him no. I said I'd get around to it. Ryan stopped typing. But what if he didn't wait for me to say yes? Daniel went on, the pieces sliding into place with a horrible click. What if he'd already been inside? What if that whole conversation was just him testing to see if I'd noticed anything? And I hadn't. I'd noticed nothing. I never notice anything. That's the whole problem. That's always been the whole problem. Hey! Ryan gripped his brother's shoulder. Stop. This is not your fault. A man who spends his life learning how to break into things broke into your life. That's not a failure of yours. That's a crime of his. Now focus. We can prove this. If he changed your password 3 days ago, there's a log, a device, an IP address, a location. Everything leaves a trail. Let me work. Ryan worked, and Daniel paced, and the sun climbed higher over the ruined house. An hour later, Ryan sat back from the screen, and the look on his face made Daniel's stomach drop. What? Daniel said. What is it? Tell me. I got into a recovery method, Ryan said quietly. Found the login history. And you're right. Someone accessed your account 3 days ago from a device that isn't yours. But that's not the part that scares me. He turned the laptop around. The part that scares me is this. Whoever it was, they didn't just read your messages. They installed something, a remote management profile, the kind of thing a company puts on employee phones so they can control them, wipe them, send messages from them. Someone turned your personal phone into a device they could operate from anywhere in the world. They could send texts as you, read everything you read, track where you went. Listen, maybe, all of it, remotely, invisibly. Daniel stared at the screen, at the lines of data that meant nothing to him and everything to his brother. So the messages, he said slowly, the threats to Emily, weren't sent by you, weren't even sent from near you. They were pushed to your phone from somewhere else and delivered as if you'd typed them. Your phone was on the counter, plugged in, doing nothing. And somebody a mile away, 10 miles away, 100 miles away, was typing threats to your wife with your name on them. Ryan's voice was tight with anger. "This is it, Danny. This is the proof. This clears you." For one shining, dizzying second, Daniel felt hope surge through him like light. Proof, real proof, something Reynolds could hold in his hands, and then Ryan's face fell. "What?" Daniel said. "What now? Why do you look like that?" "Because whoever sets this up is good. Really good. Professionally good." Ryan pointed at the screen. "The remote profile is still active. Right now, as we speak. Which means whoever installed it can see that someone's poking around in your account. They can see us, Danny. They know we found it. And if they're smart, and they are very smart, they're going to do the one thing that erases all of this before we can hand it to the police." He looked up, and the fear in his eyes was raw. "They're going to wipe it, remotely, all of it. The logs, the profile, the evidence, everything that proves you're innocent, and once it's gone, it's gone." The two brothers stared at each other. "How long?" Daniel whispered. "I don't know. Minutes, maybe. I'm trying to pull a copy right now. Dump everything to an isolated drive before they. No. What? What's happening?" "They're doing it." Ryan's fingers slammed across the keyboard. "The wipe just started. Someone triggered a remote wipe. They're deleting the profile, the logs, all of it right now in real time. Come on, copy faster, copy faster." Daniel stood frozen, helpless, watching his brother fight an invisible enemy for the only evidence that could save him. Ryan's whole body was rigid, his eyes locked on the screen, his hands moving faster than Daniel had ever seen them move. "Ryan," Daniel breathed. I know. Shut up. Let me work." Numbers scrolled, a progress bar crawled, and somewhere out in the world, a man who had planned everything sat watching his own screen, watching the evidence of his crime dissolve into nothing, smiling. "Come on," Ryan whispered. "Come on, you beautiful piece of yes, got it. He sat back, his hands shaking, his shirt soaked through with sweat. "Tell me you got it," Daniel said. "Tell me." "I got most of it. Not all. They wiped the live profile before I could grab the whole thing, but I got the login logs, the IP addresses, the timestamps, and most importantly, I got the installation record, the moment the remote profile was put on your phone, time, date, and the device it came from." Ryan wiped his face with a trembling hand. "It's not a smoking gun. A good lawyer could pick at it, but it's real, it's independent, it came from the cloud, not the phone. And it proves someone else was controlling your device. That's enough to make Reynolds take you seriously. That's enough to point the investigation somewhere other than you." Daniel could barely breathe. "Does it say who? The device it came from? Does it have a name?" Ryan's face changed again, and this time it wasn't fear. It was something colder. "It doesn't have a name," he said, "but it has a location, the place where the remote profile was first installed on your phone, where someone stood with your phone or a connection to it and turned it into their puppet." He turned the laptop around one more time. "Danny, does this address mean anything to you?" Daniel looked at the screen, and the world stopped. He knew that address. He had been to that address 100 times. He had eaten lunch there, celebrated deals there, sat in the leather chairs, and drunk expensive scotch there. It was the private office of Richard Hayes. Daniel's legs gave out, and he caught himself on the edge of the table. "It's him," he said. His voice didn't sound like his own. "It's really him. Ryan, it's really him. I kept telling myself I was crazy. I kept thinking there had to be another explanation, that he couldn't, that he wouldn't, that we've been friends for 9 years, that he stood at my wedding. And it's him." "It's him," Ryan said quietly. And then Daniel did something that surprised even himself. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. Something in him went very still and very cold and very clear. "Call Reynolds," he said. "Right now. Get him here. He needs to see this." But before Ryan could pick up the phone, it rang. Not Ryan's phone. The landline. The old emergency line Emily had insisted on keeping. Both brothers went rigid. "Nobody has this number," Daniel said. "Almost nobody. It's not even listed. Emily and I, we barely who would... The phone rang again, shrill in the silent house. Daniel walked to it slowly, as though approaching something dangerous. He picked it up, he put it to his ear, and he said, in a voice that came out much steadier than he felt, "Hello." For a moment there was only silence and breathing. Then a voice, warm, familiar, almost gentle. A voice Daniel had trusted for 9 years. "Daniel," Richard Hayes said, "you've been busy this morning. You and your clever little brother. I have to admit, I didn't expect you to move this fast. I underestimated you. I don't usually make that mistake." Daniel's hand tightened on the receiver until his knuckles went white. Ryan was staring at him, mouthing, "What? What? Who is it?" And Daniel held up a hand, his eyes locked on nothing. "Where is she?" Daniel said. Just those 3 words, low and flat and terrible. Richard laughed softly. "Straight to it. I always liked that about you. No games, no dancing, just the honest question." A pause. "She's safe. For now. She's not comfortable, but she's alive, and whether she stays that way is entirely up to you." "If you touch her," Daniel said, "if you have touched her, I swear to God, Richard, I will find you, and there is no hole deep enough in this world for you to hide in." "There he is," Richard said, and there was something like delight in his voice. "There's the man I always knew was hiding under all that politeness. You know, Daniel, in 9 years I never once saw you angry. Not really. You just let things go. You let everything go. Your wife noticed it too, you know. She told me once at a company dinner while you were off getting drinks. She said, 'Sometimes I wish Daniel would just fight for something, just once.'" The words went into Daniel like a knife, exactly as they were meant to. "You're lying," Daniel said. "Am I? You'll never know now, will you? But here's the thing, my friend. You have something I want, and I have something you want. You have a little file your brother just pulled off the cloud. Login logs, IP addresses. My office address, I'd imagine, since I got sloppy that one time 3 days ago when I installed the profile. That file could cause me problems, and I have your wife. So let's be reasonable men. Let's make a trade." Daniel closed his eyes. His mind was screaming, but his voice somehow stayed level. "What trade?" "You bring me the file, every copy, the drive your brother's dumping it onto right now, every backup, everything. You come alone, no police, no Reynolds, no clever detective work, no wires. You bring me the file, and I give you your wife, and we all go on with our lives. You get Emily back, I get my clean exit, and nobody has to die." "And if I don't?" "Then Reynolds gets an anonymous tip about a body," Richard said, all the warmth gone from his voice in an instant, replaced by something flat and dead. "And a phone full of your threats, and a hidden account in your name, and a husband with a perfect alibi who obviously hired someone to make his wife disappear. You'll spend the rest of your life in a cage, Daniel, mourning a woman you'll be blamed for killing. Is that clear enough for you?" Daniel's whole body was shaking. Ryan had come to stand beside him, close, straining to hear, his face white. "How do I know she's alive?" Daniel said. "How do I know you haven't already? That this isn't just, how do I know?" There was a rustling on the line, a muffled sound, and then, faint and distant and cracking with fear, a voice Daniel would have known in the dark at the bottom of the ocean. "Daniel?" Emily's voice, thin, terrified, real. "Daniel, is that you? Don't do what he says. Don't come here. It's a trap. He's going to kill both of us. Don't you dare come. I love you. I'm so sorry. I should have told you. I found out and I was scared and I should have..." The line went muffled again. Richard's voice returned, smooth and calm. "That's enough of that," he said. "Loyal to the end, your wife. Told you not to come. She always was the smart one in your marriage, Daniel, if we're being honest. But you're going to come anyway, aren't you? Because you've spent 12 years failing to fight for her, and now, finally, here's your chance. Here's your one chance to be the man she always wished you'd be." Daniel's eyes were streaming now, but his voice when it came was ice. "Where?" he said. "And when?" "That's my boy," Richard said. "I'll be in touch with the details. Soon. Tell no one. Come alone. Bring everything." A pause. "And Daniel, for what it's worth, and I know it's worth nothing now, I truly am sorry it came to this. I liked you. I did. But your wife went digging where she shouldn't have, and once she found what she found, there was never any version of this where you both walked away clean. She did this. Remember that, in the dark, later. She did this to you, not me. You did this, Daniel said, and you're going to answer for all of it. We'll see, Richard said pleasantly. We'll see who answers for what. Goodbye, Daniel. Get some rest. You're going to need it. The line went dead. Daniel stood holding the receiver long after the dial tone began, his whole body trembling, his mind roaring. Ryan gently took the phone from his hand and set it back in its cradle. Danny, Ryan said quietly to his son, Danny, look at me. What did he say? Tell me everything he said. Daniel turned to his brother, and his face had changed. The grief was still there, and the fear. But underneath them now was something else. Something Richard Hayes, for all his cleverness, had badly, fatally miscalculated. He wants the file, Daniel said. Every copy. He wants me to bring it to him. Alone. No police. In exchange for Emily. And if I don't, he frames me for her murder and disappears with the money. Ryan's face was grim. It's a trap. You know that. The second he has that file and has you in a room, you're both dead. He can't let either of you live. You're the only people who can prove what he did. He's not trading. He's collecting. I know, Daniel said. Then we call Reynolds. Right now. We give him the file. We tell him everything. We let the police handle Richard the right way with warrants and tactical teams and Richard finds out, Daniel said. You heard how good he is. He's been inside my life for weeks. He's watching everything. The second the police mobilize, the second there's a warrant, the second anything official happens, he'll know, and he'll kill her. He'll kill Emily and vanish, and I will spend the rest of my life knowing I could have saved her, and I called for help instead. Danny, no. Daniel grabbed his brother by both shoulders. Listen to me. For once in my life, I'm going to fight for something. He's right about that, at least. 12 years, Ryan. 12 years I let everything go. Every argument, every hurt, every problem, I just let it slide because it was easier, because fighting was hard, because I told myself keeping the peace was the same as being a good husband. And it wasn't. It was just being a coward, and it almost cost me the only thing that ever mattered. His voice broke, then hardened. But not anymore. Not this time. This time I fight. Ryan looked at his brother, and he saw something he had never seen in Daniel's face before, not in 42 years. And it scared him, and it made him proud, and it broke his heart all at once. Okay, Ryan said slowly. Okay. But you're not doing it his way. You're not walking into a room to get executed. If we're going to do this, we do it smart. We do it my way. You want to fight? Fine. But you fight with the one thing Richard doesn't think you have. Which is? Ryan's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Me, he said. He thinks I'm just your kid brother who plays with computers. He has no idea what I can do when someone I love is on the line. He controlled your phone from a distance, Danny. He turned your own device against you. Ryan sat down at his laptop, cracked his knuckles, and began to type. Let's see how he likes it when the tables turn. Let's see how he likes it when someone reaches into his world from the outside and starts pulling strings he didn't know were there. Daniel sat down beside his brother, his heart pounding, his grief and his fury and his hope all tangled together into one burning thing. Where do we start? He said. We start with the file, Ryan said. He wants it. That means it's dangerous to him. That means somewhere in these logs is something he can't afford for anyone to see. He got sloppy once 3 days ago and left his office address in the record. If he was sloppy once, he was sloppy twice. Everyone's sloppy twice. And when I find the second mistake... Ryan's eyes narrowed at the screen. We won't just prove you're innocent. We'll find exactly where he's keeping her. And then, brother, we go get your wife back. Outside, the morning sun climbed over a quiet suburban street, over ordinary houses full of ordinary people, waking up to ordinary Tuesdays. And inside one house, two brothers bent over a glowing screen, hunting a man who thought he had already won, a man who had made exactly one mistake he didn't yet know about. He had gone after the wrong family. And somewhere across the city, in a room without windows, Emily Carter pulled against the ropes that held her wrists and stared at the door and whispered her husband's name into the dark, praying that for once, just this once, He would do the reckless, foolish, impossible thing. She had no idea he already had. Ryan hunted for the second mistake for 3 straight hours, and Daniel learned what it meant to sit still while everything inside him screamed to move. It was almost 11 in the morning when Ryan suddenly stopped typing. "Danny," he said quietly. "Come here, look at this." Daniel was at his side in an instant. "What? What did you find?" "The file Richard wants. I've been going through it line by line, every timestamp, every connection, and I kept asking myself, why does he want this back so badly? The login logs prove someone controlled your phone, sure, that's bad for him, but it's not fatal. A good lawyer could muddy it. So why is he willing to trade Emily's life to get it back?" Ryan pointed at the screen. "Because it's not just login logs. When he installed that remote profile on your phone, the profile started syncing. And it didn't just push messages out. It pulled things in. It backed up. And one of the things it backed up 3 days ago was a folder that wasn't yours." Daniel stared. "What do you mean wasn't mine?" "I mean, when Richard connected his system to your phone to control it, for about 90 seconds, the sync went both ways. Your phone pulled a copy of something off his machine. A mirror. An accident. He'd never have allowed it if he'd noticed. But he didn't notice because he was busy installing his little puppet profile, and he left a door open for a minute and a half." Ryan's voice was tight with disbelief. "Danny, your phone accidentally copied part of Richard's private files, and it's all right here, buried in the cloud backup. He knows it's here. That's why he wants every copy destroyed. It's not the logs he's afraid of, it's this." "What is it?" Daniel breathed. "What's in the folder?" Ryan opened it, and for a long moment, neither brother spoke. Financial records, account numbers, offshore transfers, spreadsheets that tracked millions of dollars moving out of the company Daniel had helped build, siphoned off over years, hidden inside fake contracts and phantom vendors and shell companies stacked inside shell companies. Daniel's own name appeared over and over on documents he had never seen, forged approvals, falsified sign-offs, a paper trail carefully constructed to make it look as though Daniel Carter had been the one stealing all along. "He was setting me up for years," Daniel whispered. "Not just for Emily, for the theft, the whole thing. If it ever came apart, I was the one who'd go to prison for it. I was the fall guy from the very beginning." "And Emily found it," Ryan said. "This is what she was investigating, this exact thing. She found the fraud, and she started pulling the thread, and the thread led to Richard, and Richard realized his Patsy's wife was about to blow up 9 years of theft." He sat back. "She wasn't running from you, Danny. She was trying to protect you. She was building a case to prove you were being framed before you even knew you were being framed." Daniel put a hand over his mouth, his eyes filled. All those late nights, all those locked laptops and whispered phone calls. She hadn't been pulling away from him. She'd been fighting for him in the dark, alone, terrified, protecting a man who was too busy congratulating himself over a bridge contract to notice his wife was carrying the weight of their whole future on her shoulders. "I didn't see it," he said. "She was drowning right in front of me and I didn't see it." "You're going to see her again," Ryan said fiercely, "and you're going to tell her all of it. But right now, I need you with me, because this changes everything. This folder isn't just proof you're innocent. It's proof Richard is guilty. Fraud, embezzlement, forgery, years of it, in his own files, in his own handwriting practically. This is the thing that puts him in prison for the rest of his life. This is worth killing for, which means—" Ryan's face darkened. "Which means he'll never make a real trade," Daniel finished. Emily was right. It's a trap. He can't let this folder exist, and he can't let us exist. The trade was never real. "No," Ryan said. "It never was. So we're not going to make his trade. We're going to make ours." At 11:40, Daniel's phone rang. His backup phone, an old one Ryan had activated that morning, the only number Richard now had. Daniel looked at Ryan. Ryan nodded, hit record on his laptop, and gestured. "Answer it," Daniel answered. "Richard." "Good morning again, Daniel." The voice was rested, pleasant, obscene in its calm. "I trust you've had time to think, and to talk to that brother of yours. How is Ryan, by the way? Still poking at the file? He should be careful." Some things are dangerous to look at too closely. I've thought about it, Daniel said. I'll bring you the file. Every copy, just like you said. I'm so glad to hear that. A pause. Here's how it's going to work. Tonight, 9 o'clock. There's an old warehouse off the county road, the one the company used for storage before we moved everything. You know it. You've been there. You come alone, you bring the file, all copies, on physical drives, and you bring nothing else. No phone that anyone can trace, no wire, no brother waiting in the parking lot, no clever surprises. If I see one police car, if I see one thing I don't like, Emily dies before you reach the door. Do you understand me? I understand. I don't think you fully do, Richard said softly. So let me be very clear. I have a man with me. His name doesn't matter to you, but his work will. He is not a businessman like me, Daniel. He does not have my patience or my sentimentality. He hurts people for money, and he is very, very good at it. His name is Victor, and Victor is watching your wife right now. So when I tell you to come alone, I am telling you that Victor's finger is on the trigger, and the only thing keeping it there instead of pulling is my phone call telling him you've cooperated. 9 o'clock. Come alone. Bring everything. The line went dead. Daniel set the phone down. His hands were steady now. That was the strange thing. Somewhere in the last few hours, the shaking had stopped, and in its place had come a cold, clean focus he had never felt before in his life. You're not going alone, Ryan said immediately. I don't care what he said. You are not walking into that warehouse by yourself. I have to. You have to walk in. You don't have to be alone. Ryan turned his laptop around. Listen to me. He made a mistake. 2 of them, actually. The first was the folder. The second was this warehouse. He picked it because it's isolated, because it's off the grid, because no one goes there. But Danny, it's a company warehouse. Our company. Which means it's on the company network. Which means it has security cameras, a smart alarm system, networked door locks, climate sensors, all of it. Installed 4 years ago by a vendor I can find in about 10 minutes. And all of it connects to a system that I, as a person who has done security consulting for firms exactly like ours, know exactly how to get into. Daniel stared at him. You can get into the warehouse's systems. I can get into the warehouse's everything, Ryan said. The cameras, so I can see every room before you walk into it. The door locks, so I can open a path for you or seal one behind Richard. The lights, the alarm. If it's connected, it's mine. He thinks that warehouse is his fortress. I'm going to turn it into his cage. Ryan's jaw set. He controlled your world from a distance, Danny. Tonight, I control his. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, something like hope moved through Daniel. But it was tangled up with fear, because he understood the stakes now with total clarity. If Ryan was wrong, if a lock stuck, if a camera lagged, if Victor moved faster than either of them planned, Emily died. And then Daniel died. And Richard walked away into the sunset with millions of dollars and 2 more bodies behind him. There's a problem, Daniel said slowly. Victor. Richard said Victor is with Emily, watching her, finger on the trigger. If we make one wrong move at the warehouse, Victor kills her before we can get to her. Unless... He looked at Ryan. Unless Emily and the warehouse are the same place. Are they? Is he keeping her there? I don't know, Ryan admitted. He didn't say. He might be keeping her somewhere else entirely and only bringing her to the warehouse for the trade. Or he might be bluffing about Victor being with her right now to keep you scared. I can't know until I'm in the system and I can see the cameras. He frowned. But that's a risk we can't take. If she's not at the warehouse, if she's somewhere else with a killer, then even a perfect operation at the warehouse gets you nothing. You hand over the file, Richard makes a call, Victor kills Emily wherever she is, and Richard's men kill you at the warehouse. We need to know where she is. Everything depends on it. The 2 brothers sat in silence, the weight of it pressing down on them. And then Daniel said something that made Ryan go still. The folder, Daniel said, the one my phone copied off Richard's machine. You said it was a mirror, a partial backup of his files. How partial? What else is in there besides the financials? Ryan blinked. Then his eyes went wide. I didn't look past the financial folder. I found the fraud and I stopped. I didn't check the rest. He spun back to the laptop. There could be more. His messages, his contacts, his Danny. If his phone synced too, if any part of his communications came across. He was already digging, fingers flying, and Daniel stood over his shoulder, barely breathing. "There," Ryan said. "There's a messages cache, partial. It only grabbed a slice, the most recent stuff from 3 days ago. But it's here, his texts. Give me a second to—" He stopped. His face changed. "Oh my God." What is it?" "He's been texting Victor." Ryan's voice had dropped to a whisper. "It's all here. The last 3 days of it. The planning, the timeline, and Danny." He looked up, and his face was white. "An address. Victor sent Richard an address 3 days ago. Location secure. Package will hold here. It's not the warehouse. It's a different place. A house. On the north side, out past the county line." Ryan's hands were shaking now. "This is where he's keeping her. This is where Emily is. Right now. This is real. I have the address." Daniel gripped the back of the chair to keep from falling. "You're sure? You're absolutely sure? Package will hold here. 3 days ago. The same day he installed the profile on your phone. The same day everything started." Ryan looked up at his brother. "She's not at the warehouse, Danny. The warehouse is the trap, the trade, the drive, all of it. That's theater. He wants you at the warehouse, so Victor's free to deal with Emily somewhere else, quietly, while Richard handles you. Emily is at this house, and if we go to the warehouse tonight like good little victims, we're leaving her exactly where a killer can reach her." The plan cracked open and reformed in Daniel's mind, faster than he'd ever thought in his life. "Then we split it," Daniel said. "Everything changes. I go to the warehouse because I have to, because if I don't show up, Richard knows something's wrong and he makes the call to kill her. I keep Richard busy. I keep his attention on me. And while he thinks he's got me exactly where he wants me," he looked at his brother, "someone gets Emily out of that house." "Someone?" Ryan repeated flatly. "Danny, that someone can't be me. I have to be on the systems. I have to be your eyes at the warehouse, or you're dead in the first 30 seconds. And it can't be you. You have to be the one Richard sees." "So who? Who gets Emily? You want to hand this to the police after all, is that it? Because the second we bring in the cops, Richard's watching and—" "Not the police," Daniel said. "Reynolds." Ryan stopped. "Not the department," Daniel said. "Not a task force, not a raid, not warrants and radios that Richard might be listening to. One man. Reynolds. The detective who almost believed me last night. The one whose gut told him something was wrong. If we bring him everything, the folder, the fraud, the location, the recording of Richard's call, if we put it all in his hands and we tell him exactly what's happening and when, he can move on that house himself, quiet, off the books. One detective and whoever he trusts, while I keep Richard staring at me across a warehouse floor. And if Reynolds says no, Ryan asked. If he says this is insane, we do it by the book, we call it in, and Richard finds out and Emily dies? Daniel's jaw tightened. Then we're no worse off than we are right now. But I looked that man in the eye last night, Ryan. He didn't have to let me stay in my house. He didn't have to arrange for you to see the phone. He did those things because something in him knew I was telling the truth. I'm betting Emily's life that I read him right. He straightened. Call him, now, before I lose my nerve. It was 1 p.m. when Detective Michael Reynolds walked back into Daniel Carter's kitchen, and the look on his face said he'd expected a very different reason for the summons. "You'd better have something real," Reynolds said, "because I spent all morning defending a decision not to arrest you, and my captain is running out of patience, and so am I. Sit down, Detective," Daniel said, "and watch this." Ryan turned the laptop around and walked Reynolds through it. The remote profile on Daniel's phone, installed from Richard's office 3 days ago. The login logs. The messages pushed to Daniel's phone while he sat surrounded by witnesses. And then the folder. The fraud. The forged documents with Daniel's name on them. The years of theft. And finally the messages between Richard and a man named Victor. And the address where a woman was being held against her will. Reynolds didn't say the word for a long time. He read. He scrolled back and read again, and Daniel watched 22 years of instinct war with 22 years of procedure across the detective's weathered face. "This is a cloud extraction," Reynolds finally said, "pulled by a private party, not through a warrant, not through a chain of custody. A defense attorney would call it fruit of a poison tree. A judge might throw out every word of it." "I don't care about a trial right now," Daniel said. "I care about my wife. She's in that house, detective, right now, with a man who hurts people for money. And tonight at 9 o'clock, Richard Hayes wants me to walk into a warehouse and hand him the only proof of his crimes so he can destroy it and then kill me, and then have Victor kill Emily and disappear with millions of dollars. That's the plan. That's the real plan. The trade is a lie. And you're the only person on earth who can stop it without tipping him off." Reynolds looked at him for a long moment. "Why not call it in? Why not let me bring in a team? Do this right. Hit both locations, warrants, tactical." "Because he's watching," Ryan cut in. "He got into Danny's whole digital life for weeks and nobody noticed. You think he's not monitoring police channels or paying someone who does? You mobilize a team, you file a warrant. You put it on any system he can reach, and he knows. And the second he knows, he makes one phone call, and Emily's gone, and so is any chance of catching him. This has to be quiet. It has to be small. It has to be you." "You're asking me to go off book," Reynolds said slowly, "to take an address I got from an illegal data pull and hit a house alone or nearly alone with no warrant on the word of a man who was my prime suspect 12 hours ago." "Yes," Daniel said simply. "That's exactly what I'm asking." Reynolds stood. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to them for a long, agonizing moment, and Daniel felt his whole future, and Emily's, balancing on the point of a single man's conscience. 22 years, Reynolds said quietly, not turning around. 22 years I've done this job, and I've watched guilty men walk because we did everything right. And I've watched innocent people get chewed up because the system moved too slow to save them. He turned around. "My gut told me last night you didn't do this. I've learned the hard way that when I ignore my gut, people get hurt." He looked at Daniel. "I'll take the house. Me and one man I trust with my life. A partner I've had for 15 years. Off the books, off the radio, off every channel Hayes could be watching. We move on the house at 9, the same time you walk into the warehouse, so his attention's split and his man Victor is focused on the trade instead of the hostage. Daniel let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding since the night before. "But understand this," Reynolds went on, and his voice was hard. "If your brother's data is wrong, if that house is empty, if this goes sideways in any of the 100 ways it can, I can't save you at that warehouse. I'll be across the county. You'll be alone in a room with a man who wants you dead. Do you understand what you're walking into?" "I understand," Daniel said. "You could die tonight, Mr. Carter. I know. Most men would let the police handle it and pray." Daniel thought about Emily, thin and terrified on the phone, whispering, "Don't come. It's a trap. I love you." He thought about 12 years of letting everything go. He thought about a man who had raised a glass and said the honest man in this city while planning to bury him. "I've spent my whole life letting other people handle things," Daniel said quietly, "letting things go, keeping the peace, and it almost got my wife killed. So no, not this time. This time I walk into that room myself. This time I fight." Reynolds looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded, once, with something that might have been respect. "Then let's build this right," he said, sitting back down. "Because if we're doing it smart. Walk me through every inch of that warehouse. Your brother's going to be your eyes and your hands on the inside. I'm going to be at the house. And you," he fixed Daniel with a hard stare, "you're going to be the bait that keeps a murderer looking the wrong way. So let's make sure you survive being bait." They planned for 6 hours. Ryan mapped the warehouse from the inside out, pulling up the security system, the camera angles, the door locks, learning which he could control and which he couldn't. He built a small earpiece rig, nearly invisible, that would let him whisper into Daniel's ear from a van parked half a mile away, close enough to hold a signal, far enough that Richard's men wouldn't spot it. He rehearsed with Daniel a dozen times. "When I say left, you go left without thinking. When I say stop, you stop like you hit a wall. When I say run, you don't ask why, you just run. Your life is going to live inside a 2-second delay, Danny, and you have to trust me with it. Reynolds studied the house from satellite images and street views, planning his approach with his partner, a quiet, solid man named Delgado, who arrived in plain clothes and an unmarked car and said almost nothing but had eyes that missed nothing either. And through all of it, Daniel felt the clock ticking down, felt 9 o'clock rushing toward him like a wall, felt his own heartbeat counting off the minutes until he would walk into a room to trade his life for his wife's. At 7, Reynolds and Delgado left for the north side to get into position near the house to wait for the signal. At 8, Ryan drove Daniel to within a half-mile of the warehouse, then split off to park the van where his signal could reach. And at 8:40, Daniel Carter stood alone at the edge of a dark, empty lot, a bag of drives in his hand, an invisible earpiece in his ear, and his brother's voice, steady and close, whispering the only comfort he had left in the world. "I'm here, Danny," Ryan said. "I'm right here. I can see the whole building. I've got the cameras. I've got the locks. You are not alone in there, no matter what it feels like. You walk in, you keep him talking, you keep his eyes on you, and you let me and Reynolds do the rest." A pause. "You ready?" Daniel looked at the dark shape of the warehouse against the night sky. Somewhere inside it, a man who had been his friend for 9 years was waiting to kill him. And somewhere across the county, in a house he had never seen, his wife was waiting to find out whether the husband who always let everything go would finally, this once, fight. "I'm ready," Daniel said. And at exactly 9 o'clock, he started walking toward the warehouse door. Behind him, in the van, Ryan's hands hovered over his keyboard, every system primed, every camera live, watching his brother walk into the mouth of it. Across the county, in the dark outside a quiet house, Reynolds touched Delgado's arm and whispered, "On my mark." And inside that house, in a windowless room, Emily Carter heard footsteps in the hall and a man's heavy breathing outside her door, and she closed her eyes and thought, "Please, whatever happens, let him have stayed home. Let him have been smart. Let him not have come." She had no idea that at that exact moment, half a mile from a warehouse across the county, her husband was pulling open a heavy steel door and stepping into the dark to save her life. The door closed behind him with a sound like a gunshot, and Richard Hayes's voice, warm and delighted and utterly without mercy, came drifting out of the shadows. "Daniel," he said, "you came. I honestly wasn't sure you had it in you." "I had it in me," Daniel said into the dark. "You just never bothered to look." Richard stepped out of the shadows, and even now, even here, he looked exactly like the man who had toasted Daniel 3 nights ago. Perfectly composed, perfectly calm, a man who had never in his life lost control of a room and did not intend to start. "Put the bag down," Richard said. "Slide it toward me. Slowly." Daniel didn't move. In his ear, Ryan's voice was a steady whisper. "I see him. One man with him, to your right near the pillar. That's Victor. He's got a gun. Don't look at him. Keep your eyes on Richard. Buy me time. I'm working the locks." Daniel kept his eyes on Richard. "The file first," Daniel said. "Then Emily. That was the deal." "The deal?" Richard repeated, and he smiled. "Daniel, we both know there was never a deal. You knew it the moment your clever brother opened that folder. You know exactly what's in it. And you know I can't let it exist, and I can't let you exist. And unfortunately for that lovely woman you married, I can't let her exist either." He spread his hands, almost apologetic. "But I needed you here, calm, cooperative, carrying every copy in one convenient bag. And here you are. So thank you for that, truly." 30 seconds, Danny," Ryan whispered. "The main door behind Richard, I can lock it, and the side door I can open it. When I say, you move toward the side door." "Not yet. Keep him talking." "Why?" Daniel said. "That's all I want to know. Before whatever you think is going to happen tonight. Why me? 9 years. You brought me into the firm. You stood at my wedding. Why did you pick me to destroy?" Something flickered across Richard's face. For the first time, a crack in the porcelain. "Because you were perfect," Richard said. honest, trusting, respected. A man nobody would ever suspect of anything, which made you the perfect man to blame for everything. Every dollar I moved with your name 3 signatures away from it. You were my insurance policy, Daniel, for 9 years. And I did like you. That's the part you won't believe. I genuinely did. It would have been so much easier if I hadn't. And Emily? Richard's jaw tightened. Emily was smarter than both of us. She found a discrepancy she was never supposed to find, and instead of coming to me or to you, she started pulling the whole thing apart in the dark. Quietly, carefully, building a case. He shook his head. She almost had me, Daniel. Another 2 weeks and she'd have handed a folder to the FBI that would have ended me. She forced my hand. Everything that's happened, all of it, she brought it down on herself and on you, the day she decided to play detective instead of minding her own business. Now, Danny, Ryan whispered. The side door's open. Main door's locked behind him. Move left 3 steps, then stop. Do it now. Daniel took 3 steps to his left. Victor's gun tracked him, and Richard's eyes narrowed. "Where do you think you're going?" Richard said. "Nowhere," Daniel said. "My legs are shaking. I've never had a gun pointed at me before. Forgive me if I can't stand perfectly still while you explain how my wife deserves to die." It was the right thing to say. Richard, who had spent his whole life reading the fear in other men and feeding on it, saw only a terrified husband and relaxed a fraction. "Reynolds is at the house," Ryan whispered. "Just got the signal. He's moving in 90 seconds. Keep Richard's eyes on you. Whatever happens in the next 2 minutes, do not let him make a phone call. If he calls Victor's partner at the house, Emily dies before Reynolds gets to the door. He cannot make that call, Danny, whatever it takes." Daniel's blood went cold. Richard's phone, it was in his left hand, held loosely at his side, and Daniel understood now with total clarity that his wife's life lived inside that phone. 1 call, 1 text, and she was gone. "The trade," Daniel said, louder than he meant to, forcing Richard's attention back onto him. "You said you needed the file. Fine, it's yours. But you have to do one thing first." Richard raised an eyebrow. "I have to do nothing. You're not in a position to negotiate. Prove she's alive." Daniel's voice cracked, and this time it wasn't an act. "You want me to hand you the only thing keeping me breathing? Fine. But I'm not handing you a single drive until I hear my wife's voice one more time. Call the house. Put her on. Let me hear her. Then it's all yours." It was a gamble, and Daniel knew it. He was inviting the very phone call that could kill her. But Ryan's voice was already in his ear, fast and sharp. Smart, very smart. If he calls now, he's calling to prove she's alive, not to kill her, and Reynolds is 40 seconds out. Make him dial. It keeps his hands busy and his eyes down. Do it. Richard studied Daniel for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. "You want to hear her voice?" he said. "How sentimental. Fine, one last time. Let it never be said I'm not a romantic." He lifted the phone. He looked down to dial. And in that half-second, that single half-second while Richard Hayes's eyes dropped to the screen, everything happened at once. "Now, Danny! Run!" Ryan screamed in his ear. Daniel dropped the bag and threw himself toward the open side door. Victor's gun barked, a deafening crack that split the air, and the round smashed into the steel pillar inches from where Daniel's head had been a heartbeat before. Richard shouted. Somewhere a light went out, then another, the warehouse plunging into stuttering darkness as Ryan killed the power grid room by room, and Victor fired again, blind now, into the black. "Left, left, hard left, there's a stack of pallets. Get behind it." Ryan's voice was a lifeline in the roaring dark. "I can see you on the thermal cam. They can't see you at all. You're a ghost to them right now. Just listen to me and move." Daniel ran through this pitch black on nothing but his brother's voice, and it was the strangest, most terrifying trust of his life, hurling his body through darkness because a voice in his ear said the floor was clear. He slammed behind the pallets, his heart trying to punch through his ribs, and he heard Richard's voice rise into something that was no longer calm at all. "The lights!" Richard was snarling. "Get the lights back! He's got the systems! The brother's got the systems! Find him! Find him!" "He knows," Ryan whispered, and for the first time there was fear in his voice too. "He knows it's me." Danny, he's going to figure out you're not alone, and the second he does, he calls the house. I'm watching Reynolds' position. He's at the door. Come on, come on. And then Richard did the thing they had feared most. He lifted the phone again, and this time his thumb was already moving, and he was no longer trying to prove Emily was alive. He was calling to make sure she wasn't. He's dialing, Ryan said, his voice cracking. Danny, he's dialing the house. I can't stop a phone call. I can't reach it. Reynolds isn't through the door yet. 10 seconds. We need 10 seconds. And Daniel Carter, an engineer who had never thrown a punch in his life, who had spent 42 years letting everything go, made a decision that no calm and rational man would ever make. He stood up in the dark, and he charged the sound of Richard's voice. He couldn't see. He didn't need to. Ryan's voice guided him, breathless. 20 feet ahead, slightly right. He's there. He's right there. Victor's to your far left. He can't see you. Go! Daniel crossed the black warehouse floor in 5 seconds that felt like an hour, and he hit Richard Hayes at a dead run, and both men went down in a crashing tangle, and the phone flew out of Richard's hand and skittered away across the concrete into the dark. The phone's down. The call didn't connect, Ryan gasped. You did it, Danny. You stopped the call. Reynolds is through the door at the house right now. Hold on. Just hold on. But now Daniel was on the floor in the dark with a man who had planned 2 murders, and Richard Hayes was not a soft man, and he was not afraid, and his hands found Daniel's throat in the black with terrible purpose. You! Richard snarled, his voice inches from Daniel's face, his fingers crushing down. You had one job. Die quietly. Take the blame. You couldn't even do that right. Daniel couldn't breathe. Stars burst behind his eyes. Richard was stronger than he looked, fueled by 9 years of a lie about to collapse, and Daniel felt his own strength failing, felt the darkness in his eyes deepening from the darkness of the room into something worse. Victor! Richard was shouting, even as he choked the life out of Daniel. The far pallets! Kill the lights won't matter. Just spray the far pallets. He's turning toward you, Danny. Victor's coming. 30 feet. You have to move. You have to get up. Get up! Ryan was screaming. And in that moment, choking, dying, pinned in the dark under the man who had destroyed his life, Daniel thought of Emily. Emily whispering, "Don't come." Emily building a case for him alone in the dark for weeks because she loved him too much to let him fall. Emily, who had said once to this very man, "Sometimes I wish Daniel would just fight for something, just once, just once." Daniel stopped trying to pull Richard's hands away from his throat. Instead, he reached out into the darkness, and his fingers closed around something, a length of pipe, a fallen bar, something hard and cold and real. And with the last of the air in his lungs and the last of the strength in his arms, he swung it. It connected. Richard grunted, and the crushing grip on Daniel's throat loosened, and Daniel sucked in a breath that was more pain than air, and swung again, blind, desperate, and this time Richard cried out and rolled off him. He's off you. He's off you. Get up. Side door's still open. 12 feet at your 2 o'clock. Move, Ryan commanded. Daniel staggered to his feet, gasping, and lurched toward the door. Victor's gun roared again, and Daniel felt something tear across his shoulder, a line of fire, and he cried out but didn't stop, because stopping was dying, and he crashed through the side door into the cold night air and the blessed dim light of the parking lot. You're out. Keep going. Get to the tree line. I'm bringing the van around, Ryan said. And Daniel could hear his brother crying now, could hear the terror and the relief cracking his voice apart. You're bleeding. How bad is it? Talk to me. Emily, Daniel gasped, stumbling across the lot, his hand pressed to his shoulder. Reynolds, the house. Is she? I don't know yet. I'm trying to reach him. Keep moving. Just keep moving. And then, in Daniel's ear, another voice broke in, patched through Ryan's rig, breathless and rough and beautiful. Carter, it was Reynolds. Carter, can you hear me? Daniel stopped in the middle of the parking lot, swaying, his blood running down his arm, and he could not speak. Say it, he finally choked out. Whatever it is, just say it. There was a pause that lasted 1,000 years. We're through the door, Reynolds said. Delgado's got the man, Victor's partner. He's down and cuffed. Didn't even get a shot off. We came in too fast. Another pause, and Daniel heard, underneath the detective's voice, a sound. Crying. A woman's crying. And Carter, she's here, your wife. She's alive. She's hurt. She's scared. She's got a nasty bruise and she's been through hell. But she's alive and she's asking for you. And she won't stop asking for you." Daniel's legs gave out. He went down onto his knees on the cold concrete of the parking lot, and the pipe fell from his hand, and he pressed his bloody palm to his face and he wept, great heaving sobs that came from somewhere so deep he didn't know he had it. "She's alive," he said. "She's alive. Say it again. Please say it again." "She's alive, Daniel," Reynolds said, and his gruff voice had gone soft. "You did it. You kept him looking the wrong way just long enough. You saved her." But it wasn't over. Because behind Daniel, the side door of the warehouse burst open, and Richard Hayes staggered out into the parking lot, blood running down the side of his head, his composure finally, completely gone, and in his hand was Victor's gun, and his eyes, when they found Daniel kneeling on the concrete, were the eyes of a man who had lost everything and had nothing left to lose. "Danny, behind you! Behind you!" Ryan screamed. Daniel turned. Richard was 20 feet away, raising the gun, his hand shaking, his face a mask of rage and ruin. "You've taken everything," Richard said. His voice was wrecked. 9 years, all of it, gone, because you couldn't just die quietly. He steadied the gun on Daniel's chest. "So neither will I." Daniel did not run. He had no strength left to run, and no time. He knelt on the cold concrete, bleeding, unarmed, and he looked down the barrel of the gun held by the man who had been his friend. And the strangest thing happened. He was not afraid. "You want to know the difference between us, Richard?" Daniel said quietly. "You spent 9 years building a lie so perfect nobody could ever see through it. And it all came apart in a single night. And me? I spent 42 years being a coward who let everything go. And when it finally mattered, when the one thing I couldn't afford to lose was on the line, I fought. I finally fought." He lifted his chin. "You built an empire on lies, and it turned to dust. I've got nothing but the truth and the people who love me. And that's why you lose. That's why you were always going to lose. Not me." Richard's finger tightened on the trigger, and a shot rang out across the parking lot. But it was not from Richard's gun. Richard Hayes jerked, a look of pure astonishment crossing his face, and the gun fell from his hand and clattered to the concrete, and he sank slowly down onto his knees and then onto his side and lay still. Behind him, at the corner of the warehouse, stood Detective Delgado, his service weapon raised, having driven like a madman from the house the moment Reynolds had Emily secure, having arrived in the last possible second, having made the shot that Daniel would never forget as long as he lived. "Clear," Delgado said quietly into his radio, lowering the weapon. "Suspect down. Carter's alive." And then the parking lot was full of light and sound. Sirens Daniel hadn't heard coming. Reynolds' backup that he'd quietly staged just close enough, and Ryan's van screeching to a halt, and Ryan himself throwing open the door and running to his brother and catching him as he finally, completely collapsed. "I've got you," Ryan was saying, holding him, both of them on the ground now, both of them shaking. "I've got you, Danny. It's over. It's over. You did it. It's over." "Emily," Daniel breathed. "She's alive. You heard Reynolds. She's alive, and she's asking for you, and they're bringing her to the hospital right now, the same one they're taking you to. You're going to see her, Danny. In an hour. You're going to hold her. Just stay with me. Stay awake. The ambulance is coming." Daniel lay in his brother's arms on the cold concrete, his shoulder on fire, his throat bruised, his whole body wrecked, and he had never in his life felt anything so much like being alive. The paramedics came. They worked on his shoulder, told him the bullet had only grazed him, ugly but not deep, that he was lucky, so lucky. They loaded him into the ambulance, and through the whole ride, through the pain and the fading adrenaline and the shock, Daniel held on to one single thought, one thought that carried him through the dark like his brother's voice had carried him across the warehouse floor. Emily was alive. He was going to see Emily. They wheeled him into the emergency room, and there was chaos, doctors and nurses and questions he couldn't answer, and he kept asking for her, kept saying her name, until finally a nurse leaned close and said, "Your wife's in the next bay, sir. She's stable. She's going to be fine. Would you like to see her?" And they wheeled his gurney through a curtain. And there she was, Emily Carter, bruised and pale and exhausted, an IV in her arm, her wrists raw and bandaged where the ropes had been. And when she saw him, her whole face broke open, and she said his name, just his name, Daniel, like it was the only word left in the world. He was off the gurney before anyone could stop him, ignoring the pain, ignoring the nurse's protest, and he crossed to her bed and he took her in his arms, careful of the IV, careful of everything, and he held his wife against his chest, and he felt her heart beating, actually beating, warm and alive against his own. "You came," she wept into his shoulder. "I told you not to come. I told you it was a trap. Why did you come, you fool, you beautiful fool? You could have died." "I'll always come," Daniel said into her hair, his voice thick. "Do you hear me? From now on. Always. I spent 12 years letting everything go, letting us go, and I almost lost you because of it. Never again. I don't care what it costs. I will always come for you." She pulled back and looked at him, tears streaming down her bruised face. "I found it," she said. "The fraud. I found what Richard was doing, and I was so scared, and I should have told you. I should have trusted you, but I was trying to protect you. I was trying to build a case first so you'd never have to know how bad it was, and instead I know," Daniel said. "I know everything. Ryan found the folder. I know you were fighting for me the whole time, alone, in the dark. And I know I never saw it. And I'm so sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry I made you feel like you had to carry it alone." He pressed his forehead to hers. "We keep secrets from each other because we think we're protecting each other. And all we're really doing is leaving each other alone in the dark. No more. No more secrets. No more carrying it alone. From now on, we carry everything together. Everything." "Together," she whispered. "Together," he said. Outside the curtain, Detective Reynolds stood with Ryan, watching the two of them hold each other, and for a moment neither man said anything. "He's going to make it," Ryan finally said. It wasn't quite a question. "They both are," Reynolds said, "physically. The rest of it takes longer." He glanced at Ryan. "That was good work tonight. What you did with those systems. Reckless, illegal, and the kind of thing that could get us all in a lot of trouble. But good work. You saved your brother's life, and your sister-in-law's." "Richard," Ryan said. "Is he—" "Alive," Reynolds said. "Delgado's a good shot. Put him down without killing him, which is harder than the movies make it look. He's in surgery. He'll live." His jaw tightened. "He'll live to stand trial. Fraud, kidnapping, conspiracy, attempted murder, and once we get into those files properly, with warrants this time, a paper trail 9 years deep. He built himself an empire, and he's going to spend the rest of his life in a cell, watching it get taken apart piece by piece." He looked at Ryan. "That folder your brother's phone copied. It's not admissible, not the way we got it, but it told us exactly where to look. And now that we know where to look, we'll build it clean, brick by brick, the right way. Richard Hayes is finished. He just doesn't know it yet." Ryan let out a long, shaking breath. And then, for the first time in almost 2 days, he laughed, a broken, exhausted, disbelieving laugh. "He turned Danny's phone into a puppet," Ryan said. "Controlled his whole life from a distance. Thought he was so far ahead of everyone that no one could ever touch him." He shook his head. "And in the end, he got taken down by the kid brother who plays with computers, and an engineer who never threw a punch in his life, and a detective who trusted his gut. He never saw us coming. Any of us." "No," Reynolds agreed, watching Daniel hold Emily through the gap in the curtain, watching two people who had almost lost everything cling to what they'd nearly lost. "He never did. Men like Hayes never do. They spend so long looking down on everyone that they never notice the people underneath them are the ones holding up the whole world." Inside the curtain, Daniel Carter held his wife, and Emily held him back, and neither of them let go for a very long time. Somewhere in the building, a man who had spent 9 years building a perfect lie lay under a surgeon's hands, his empire crumbling, his future a cell. And here, in a small curtained bay in an emergency room in the middle of the night, Two people who had spent 12 years letting the distance grow between them found in the worst night of their lives the thing they had almost lost forever, each other. "It's over," Emily whispered. "It's over," Daniel said. But even as he said it, even as he held her, Daniel Carter knew that some things were only just beginning. The healing, the rebuilding, the long, slow work of learning how to be honest with each other after 12 years of comfortable silence, the nightmares that would come for both of them in the months ahead. But they would face all of it the same way they had faced this night, together. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Daniel Carter was not afraid of what came next. It looks like part 4 is already complete, so here is the continuation that carries the story home. The days after that night moved slowly, the way days do when a person has been standing at the edge of losing everything and is suddenly impossibly allowed to keep it. Daniel spent 2 nights in the hospital. His shoulder was stitched and bandaged, his throat still purple with the marks of Richard's hands, and every time he closed his eyes, he was back on that warehouse floor in the dark, choking, listening to his brother scream his name. But every time he opened them, Emily was there, in the chair beside his bed, on the edge of the mattress, holding his hand, asleep with her head against his good shoulder. And each time he saw her, the nightmare loosened its grip a little more. "You're staring at me again," Emily said on the second morning, her voice still hoarse. "I'm allowed to," Daniel said. "I almost never got to again." She looked down at their joined hands. The bruising on her wrists had darkened to deep purples and yellows, and she still flinched at sudden sounds, still woke in the night with a gasp. But she was here. She was alive. And for Daniel, that simple fact was a miracle he could not stop marveling at. "Ryan came by while you were sleeping," she said. "He didn't want to wake you. He looks terrible, Daniel. He hasn't slept. He keeps blaming himself, saying if he'd found the folder faster, if he'd noticed the profile sooner." "That's not fair," Daniel said. "He saved both of us. He was my eyes in that building. Every step I took, he took with me. If he'd been half a second slower, I'd be dead." "I know that," Emily said. "You know that. He doesn't know that. You need to tell him." Daniel did tell him. That afternoon when Ryan came back, unshaven and gray with exhaustion, Daniel took his brother's hand and held it and said the things a man says when words are not enough and he uses them anyway. "You didn't just save my life," Daniel said. "You saved my marriage. You saved everything I have. And you did it by being exactly who you are, the kid brother who plays with computers, the one nobody ever takes seriously. Richard took everybody seriously except you. And that's why he lost. Do you understand me? You, not the police, not luck, you." Ryan's eyes filled, and he ducked his head the way he had when he was a boy, the way he always did when feeling was too big to hold. "I was so scared, Danny," he whispered. "When Victor fired that first shot, when Richard got his hands on you and I couldn't do anything, I couldn't reach through the screen and pull him off you, all I could do was talk. And I kept thinking, if I say the wrong thing, if I send him the wrong way, my brother dies, and it's my fault." "You said the right things," Daniel said. "Every one of them. You got me out. Now let it go. Please, for me, let it go." And Ryan, who had spent 2 days drowning in what could have gone wrong, finally, slowly, let it go. Detective Reynolds came on the 3rd day, out of uniform, a paper cup of terrible hospital coffee in each hand. He gave one to Daniel and sat in the chair by the window, and for a while the 2 men just drank coffee together in a comfortable silence that would have been unimaginable 72 hours earlier, when one of them had been the prime suspect and the other had been building the case against him. "Richard came out of surgery," Reynolds finally said. "He's going to live. He's under guard, and the moment he's well enough, he's being arraigned." He turned the coffee cup slowly in his hands. "I've been doing this 22 years, Daniel. I've put away a lot of men, but I don't think I've ever seen anything built as carefully as what Hayes built around you. Years of it. Documents, forgeries, financial trails, all of it aimed at one thing, making sure that if it ever came apart, you were the one holding the pieces." "How bad was it?" Daniel asked quietly. "If Emily hadn't found it, if none of this had happened, if Richard had just kept going, what would have happened to me eventually?" Reynolds was quiet for a moment. "Eventually the theft would have gotten too big to hide. It always does. And when the auditors came, or the FBI, they'd have found a paper trail pointing straight at you. Your signatures, your approvals, a hidden account in your name with cash deposits going back months. He met Daniel's eyes. You'd have gone to prison, Daniel, for a long time, for crimes you never committed. And Richard would have stood beside you at the sentencing with a hand on your shoulder, telling the cameras how betrayed he felt, how he never suspected, how his own partner had deceived him for years. He shook his head. You want to know the truth? Your wife didn't just save herself by digging into that fraud. She saved you from a future you'd never have seen coming. She was your guardian angel, and you didn't even know it. Daniel looked over at Emily, asleep in the next bed, her bruised face peaceful for once, and something swelled in his chest so large he could barely breathe around it. I didn't deserve her, he said quietly. Most of us don't deserve the people who love us, Reynolds said, standing, setting his empty cup on the windowsill. The trick is spending the rest of your life trying to. He paused at the door. The folder your brother pulled, we can't use it, not the way we got it. But it told us where every body was buried. We've got forensic accountants going through the company records now, with warrants, doing it clean. It's going to take months, maybe a year. But when we're done, Richard Hayes is going to face a mountain of evidence built the right way. Evidence no lawyer can throw out. He's finished. He built an empire on lies, and every single lie is going to be pulled apart, brick by brick, in a courtroom, in front of the world. And me, Daniel said. The forged documents. My name on all those transfers. Am I? You're cleared, Reynolds said firmly. Completely. The remote profile on your phone, the timeline, your witnesses at dinner, and Richard's own confession that you heard and your brother recorded, illegal or not, it all points one direction. You're not a suspect anymore, Daniel. You're a victim and a witness. The DA is going to want you to testify. Can you do that? Daniel looked at his hands, at the marks on his wrists, at the bandage on his shoulder. He thought about walking into a courtroom and facing the man who had been his friend for 9 years, the man who had toasted him and hugged him and tried to strangle him on a warehouse floor. I'll be there, Daniel said. Every day if I have to. I'll look him in the eye and tell the truth. He spent 9 years counting on me being too trusting, too polite, too willing to let everything go to ever fight back. He looked up at Reynolds. He's going to find out just how wrong he was. The trial did not happen for 8 months. Those 8 months were their own kind of ordeal, a long, slow, grinding recovery that had none of the sharp terror of that one night, but wore at both of them in quieter ways. Daniel's shoulder healed, but the nightmares stayed longer. He would wake in the dark with his hands at his own throat, gasping, certain he was back on that concrete floor, and Emily would wrap herself around him and whisper that he was home, that he was safe, that it was over, until his breathing slowed. And Emily had her own ghosts. She flinched at the sound of a door closing. She could not stand to be in a windowless room. For weeks, she slept with the lights on, and sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary day, she would go very still and very far away, back to that room where she'd been held, and Daniel learned to recognize the look, and learned to simply sit beside her and hold her hand and wait for her to come back. But something was happening in those months, something neither of them had expected. In the wreckage of their old life, in the long hours of healing, they were finding each other again. I have to tell you something, Emily said one night, about a month after the hospital. They were sitting together on the couch of the old house, the house they both now hated and could not bring themselves to leave, not yet. And I've been so afraid to say it, but we promised, no more secrets. Daniel felt his stomach tighten, but he took her hand. Tell me, when I first found the discrepancy in the accounts months ago, before any of this, I almost told you. I sat you down at this exact table one night, and I opened my mouth to say it. Her eyes filled. And you were so happy, Daniel. You'd just gotten the news about the bridge contract, and you were so proud, And you kept talking about Richard, about how much you owed him, about how he was like a brother to you. And I looked at you, so happy, so trusting, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the one to tell you that your best friend was stealing millions of dollars and framing you for it. So I decided to build the case first, to get proof so solid that you'd have no choice but to believe it, so you wouldn't have to just take my word against a man you loved like family. A tear slid down her cheek. And by protecting you from the truth, I almost got us both killed. If I'd just told you that night, if I'd trusted you to handle it, we could have gone to the police together, months ago, before Richard ever knew we were onto him. Daniel absorbed this, and he understood, with a clarity that hurt, that they had both done the same thing from opposite directions. She had kept the truth from him to protect him. He had let everything go to avoid conflict. And in the space between her silence and his avoidance, a killer had built a trap around both of them. We were both trying to protect each other, Daniel said slowly. You by carrying it alone. Me by never asking hard questions, never pushing, never wanting to know what was under the surface as long as the surface looked calm. He shook his head. You know what Richard said to me in the warehouse? He said you told him once at a company dinner that you wished I would just fight for something, just once. He looked at her. Was that true? Emily's face crumpled. I never said that to Richard. He made that up to hurt you, to make you feel like I'd betrayed you. She gripped his hand hard. But Daniel, I won't lie to you, because we're done lying to each other. There were times. Yes. There were times over the years when I wished you'd fight. Not with me. For us. When something was wrong and you'd just smooth it over, let it go, keep the peace. I used to think, one day I need him to care enough to fight. Her voice broke. And then that night, in that house, tied to a chair, I heard the man guarding me get a phone call, and he said your name, and I realized you were coming, and I was so terrified you'd die that I begged you not to come. But underneath the terror, Daniel, underneath it, there was this other thing I'm ashamed of. This small voice that said, he's fighting, he's finally fighting, for me. Daniel pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. I'll fight for you every day for the rest of my life, he said into her hair. But I'm going to do something harder than fighting, too. I'm going to pay attention. That's what I never did. I never fought because I never noticed there was anything to fight about. I let the distance grow between us for 12 years because it was quiet and comfortable, and I told myself quiet meant happy. It doesn't. Quiet just means nobody's talking, and I'm done being quiet. They talked that night until the sun came up. They talked about things they had never said in 12 years of marriage. The fears they'd hidden, the resentments they'd swallowed, the loneliness they'd each felt sitting 3 feet apart on this very couch, each of them alone. And it was hard, and it hurt, and more than once one of them wept. But by morning, something had shifted. Something old and cold had cracked open, and something warm was growing in its place. The trial, when it finally came, was everything Reynolds had promised. The forensic accountants had done their work, and it was devastating. 9 years of theft laid bare in clean, admissible, unassailable detail. Shell companies, phantom vendors, offshore accounts, forged approvals, and woven all through it, the careful, patient construction of Daniel Carter as the man who would take the fall. Richard Hayes sat at the defense table in a good suit, his composure mostly recovered, and he watched the case against him assemble itself with the cold detachment of a man watching a building he built be demolished. His lawyers fought hard, but there was too much. There was simply too much, and all of it was real, and none of it could be waved away. And then Daniel took the stand. He had dreaded this moment for 8 months. He had lain awake imagining it, imagining facing Richard, imagining the man's cold eyes, imagining freezing, imagining failing. But when the moment came, when he settled into the witness chair and looked out across the courtroom and met Richard Hayes's gaze for the first time since the warehouse, he felt none of the fear he'd expected. He felt calm. He felt clear. He felt, for perhaps the first time in his life, completely and totally certain of exactly who he was. The prosecutor walked him through all of it: the dinner, the forgotten phone, The empty house, the broken glass, the messages, the account, the folder, the phone call, the warehouse. And Daniel told the truth, all of it, in a steady voice, never looking away, and the jury listened to every word. And then it was the defense's turn, and Richard's lawyer tried to shake him, tried to suggest the whole thing was a fabrication, tried to imply that perhaps Daniel and his hacker brother had cooked up an elaborate story to cover Daniel's own crimes. And Daniel let him talk, let him build his little house of insinuations. And then, when the lawyer asked him one question too many, Daniel looked past the lawyer, directly at Richard Hayes, and answered, "You want to know why I'm sure it was him?" Daniel said quietly, his eyes locked on Richard. The night of that dinner, when he thought he'd already won, when he thought I was as good as in prison and my wife as good as dead, he hugged me goodbye, and he looked me in the eye and he said, "Whatever happens, remember I'm always on your side." Daniel's voice did not waver. Who says that at a celebration dinner? Who tells a happy man whatever happens unless he already knows something terrible is about to happen? He couldn't help himself. He was so certain, so proud of his own cleverness, that he had to leave himself one little private joke. And that joke is how I knew. Before the folder, before any of it, in my gut, I knew. Because the man who spent 9 years pretending to be my friend couldn't resist gloating, just once, to a man he thought would never understand it until it was too late. The courtroom was silent, and across the room, for one single unguarded moment, Richard Hayes's mask slipped, and something flickered across his face that told the whole jury, without a word, that every syllable Daniel had spoken was true. The verdict took the jury 4 hours. Guilty, on every count. Fraud, embezzlement, kidnapping, conspiracy, attempted murder. Guilty, 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 the word ringing out again and again until it filled the room. Richard Hayes was sentenced to a length of time that meant he would never see the outside world again as a free man. And as they led him away, he turned once and found Daniel's eyes in the gallery, and Daniel did not look away, and did not gloat, and did not smile. He simply held Richard's gaze, steady and calm, until Richard was the one who looked away first. It was, Daniel would think later, the most important thing he did in that entire courtroom. He did not become like Richard. He did not answer cruelty with cruelty or triumph with contempt. He simply stood in the truth and let the truth be enough. Outside the courthouse, Emily took his hand. "It's really over now," she said. "Isn't it?" "It's really over," Daniel said. But they both knew that some endings are also beginnings, and that the hardest and best work of their lives was still in front of them. They did not stay in the old house. They had tried for 8 months, and every day the memories were there, waiting. The kitchen floor where the glass had shattered, the counter where the phone had betrayed him, the bedroom with the half-packed suitcase. It was a house full of ghosts, and no amount of love could exorcise them. So a few weeks after the trial ended, Daniel and Emily packed their lives into boxes and left it behind. They moved to a small town on the Oregon coast, a quiet place of gray beaches and pine forests and fog that rolled in off the ocean in the mornings. Daniel found work with a small engineering firm that built bridges and roads for coastal communities. Honest work at a human scale, nothing like the empire he had helped build for a man who turned out to be a thief. Emily started writing again, something she had given up years ago in the busy noise of their old life, and slowly, page by page, she found her voice. And Daniel changed something else, something that surprised everyone who knew him. He put the phone down. Not entirely, not dramatically. He was not a man who did things dramatically. But he changed his relationship to the small, glowing rectangle that had once controlled his entire life, the device that a distant enemy had turned into a weapon aimed at his heart. He turned off the endless notifications. He stopped checking it at dinner. He left it in another room in the evenings. He changed every password, secured every account, and he learned, finally, from his brother, how to protect his own digital life instead of trusting it blindly to anyone who offered. But the real change was not about security. The real change was about attention. "You know what almost destroyed us," Daniel said one evening, months into their new life, as they walked along the beach in the fading light Emily's hand warm in his. It wasn't Richard. Not really. Richard was just the man who found the crack that was already there. "What crack?" Emily asked. "The crack between us," Daniel said. "The distance. 12 years of two people slowly stop looking at each other. I was so busy staring at that phone, at work, at the next contract, at everything except the one person standing right in front of me, that a man was able to reach into my life from 100 miles away, and I never even noticed. He knew my schedule better than I knew yours. He understood my marriage better than I did. He knew you were investigating him before I knew you were troubled." Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. "The most dangerous thing in my life was never losing my technology, Emily. It was losing you, losing the connection to the person standing right beside me, and I almost did. Not because of Richard, because of me, because I stopped paying attention." Emily's eyes were bright in the last light of the day. "But you paid attention when it counted," she said. "When it mattered most, you saw me. You came for me. You fought for me." "I want to see you every day," Daniel said. "Not just when there's a crisis, not just when a killer forces me to. Every ordinary, boring, beautiful day. That's the promise I'm making. Not just that I'll fight for you, that I'll notice you, that I'll never again let you carry something alone in the dark because I was too busy looking at a screen to see you drowning right beside me." Emily stepped into his arms, and they stood there on the cold beach with the ocean roaring behind them. Two people who had lost almost everything and found, in the losing, the thing they'd nearly let slip away years before either of them noticed it going. That night Ryan called, as he did every week now, the brothers closer than they had been since childhood. They talked about nothing important, about Ryan's new job, about a woman he'd started seeing, about a fishing trip they were planning for the summer. Ordinary things. Beautiful, ordinary things. And when Daniel hung up, he sat for a long moment looking at the phone in his hand, the same kind of device that had once been turned against him, and he thought about how a thing could be a weapon or a lifeline depending only on how you used it and who you let close. "Everything okay?" Emily asked from the doorway. "Everything's perfect," Daniel said, and he set the phone down on the table, screen down, and stood, and crossed the room to his wife. "Come here. Talk to me. Tell me about your day. All of it. Every part." She smiled, and something healed a little more in both of them, and they sat together late into the night talking, the way they had almost forgotten how to do, the way they would never let themselves forget again. Because they had learned, in the hardest way a person can learn anything, the one truth that Richard Hayes, for all his cleverness, had never understood. He had built an empire on the belief that people could be controlled from a distance, manipulated through their devices, deceived by anyone patient and clever enough to study their weaknesses. And for 9 years, he had been right. But in the end, he had been undone by the very thing he could never counterfeit and never steal. The bond between a man and his brother, the love between a husband and a wife, the stubborn, unglamorous loyalty of a detective who trusted his gut, the connections that live not on a screen, but between two people looking directly at each other, choosing each other, fighting for each other. Richard had reached into Daniel's life from 100 miles away and nearly destroyed it. And Daniel had reached across the room, across 12 years of quiet distance, and taken his wife's hand. And that simple thing, that human thing, had turned out to be stronger than every lie and every scheme and every clever trick a desperate man could devise. The night Daniel Carter left his phone charging on the kitchen counter was supposed to be the beginning of a nightmare. Instead, in the end, it became the night that saved his marriage and his life, and taught him the only lesson that ever really mattered. That in a world where anyone can be watched, and anyone can be fooled, and anyone can be reached and manipulated and betrayed through the devices that run our lives, the strongest thing a person can hold on to is not a password or a phone or a lock on a door. It is the hand of the person standing right in front of you. It is the courage to look up from the screen and see them and fight for them. It is trust and love, and the connection that no distance can break and no enemy can steal. And Daniel Carter, standing in a small house on the Oregon coast, with his wife's hand in his and the ocean singing outside the window, had finally, after almost losing it all, learned to hold on to it with everything he had. He would never let it go again. The first year on the coast was not the happy ending it looked like from the outside. That was the thing nobody told you about surviving. The world thinks the story ends when the villain is caught and the couple embraces in the hospital. But Daniel Carter was learning, one hard day at a time, that surviving is not the end of the story. It is only the beginning of a different one. The nightmares did not stop just because they'd moved. Some nights Daniel woke with his own hands at his throat, gasping, certain he was back on that warehouse floor. And some nights it was Emily who woke screaming, back in that windowless room, and Daniel would hold her and whisper that she was safe until the shaking stopped. They took turns being strong. That was the arrangement they never spoke aloud, but both understood. On the nights one of them fell apart, the other held on. And somehow, between the two of them, they always had just enough strength to get to morning. "Do you think we'll ever be normal again?" Emily asked one night, maybe 4 months in, her voice small in the dark. Daniel thought about it honestly, because they had promised each other honesty, and honesty meant not offering comfortable lies even when a lie would be kinder. "I don't think we'll be who we were," he said. "That's gone. Those two people who lived in that house and passed each other like strangers, they don't exist anymore. But I don't want to be them again anyway. I'd rather be broken and honest than whole and asleep." He pulled her closer. "So no, not normal, but maybe something better than normal, maybe awake." Emily was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I like awake." The letter came in the spring. Daniel almost threw it away when he saw the return address. It was from the state correctional facility, from Richard. He held it for a long time without opening it, standing at the kitchen counter of their small coastal house, his hands not quite steady. Part of him wanted to burn it unopened. Part of him wanted to never again let that man's words into his life in any form. But another part, a quieter part, needed to know what a man like Richard Hayes wrote from the bottom of the hole he'd dug for himself. "You don't have to read it," Emily said gently, watching him from the doorway. "I know," Daniel said, "but I think I need to." He opened it. The handwriting was Richard's, elegant and controlled even now, and the letter was short. Richard wrote that he did not expect forgiveness and was not asking for it. He wrote that he had spent his life believing that the smartest man in any room was the one pulling the strings no one else could see. He wrote that he had believed, right up until the moment Delgado's bullet dropped him in that parking lot, that he was that man. And he wrote that he had been wrong, that the strings he thought he was pulling had turned out to be attached to nothing, and the people he thought were beneath him had turned out to be holding up the whole world, and he had understood all of it exactly 1 second too late. The last line was the one that stayed with Daniel. Richard wrote, "You had the thing I could never build, no matter how much I stole. You had people who would walk into fire for you. I never understood until it killed me that this was the only kind of wealth that was ever real." Daniel set the letter down. He did not cry. He did not feel triumph or satisfaction or even anger. He felt something closer to sorrow, a strange grief for the man Richard might have been if he had ever once looked up from his schemes and seen the people around him as anything other than pieces on a board. "What does it say?" Emily asked. Daniel handed it to her. She read it, and when she finished, she was quiet. "Are you going to write back?" she asked. "No," Daniel said. "There's nothing to say. He understands now what he threw away. That's not my burden to carry anymore." He took the letter, folded it, and set it in a drawer. Not to treasure it, just to remember it. He spent his whole life believing people could be controlled from a distance, and in the end, the only thing that ever really mattered was the thing he could never fake. The people who love you enough to come for you. He looked at Emily. He learned it too late. "I learned it just barely in time. That's the only difference between us. And it's the difference between a man on the coast with his wife and a man in a cell for the rest of his life." That summer, Ryan came to visit, and he brought the woman he'd started seeing, a warm, funny paramedic named Sophia, who laughed easily and looked at Ryan the way Emily was learning to look at Daniel again. The four of them spent a week together, fishing off the pier, cooking too much food, staying up late, talking on the porch while the ocean crashed in the dark below. One evening, when the women had gone inside and the two brothers sat alone with the last of the light, Ryan said something he'd clearly been holding for a long time. "I still think about it," Ryan said. "The warehouse. Every day almost. I think about the 2-second delay, how your whole life lived inside a 2-second delay between what I saw on the screen and what I could tell you, and how many times in those 2 minutes I almost said the wrong thing. Samata." He turned his beer bottle slowly in his hands. "I've done a lot of technical work in my life, Danny. Complicated stuff, high-pressure stuff, but I've never been that scared. Never. Because none of it ever mattered like you mattered." "You didn't say the wrong thing," Daniel said. "Not once. I got lucky." "No." Daniel shook his head. "You were good. There's a difference, and you've never let yourself believe it. You saved my life because you were the best there was at the thing you do, and because you loved me enough to be perfect for 2 minutes, when perfect was the only thing that would keep me breathing." He reached over and gripped his brother's shoulder. "Richard controlled my phone from 100 miles away and thought that made him a god. And you sat in a van half a mile away and turned his own fortress against him and pulled me out of the fire with nothing but your voice. He had all the money in the world and he lost. You had a laptop and a brother you loved and you won. Tell me that's not the whole story of everything." Ryan's eyes were wet. He looked out at the ocean for a long moment. "When did you get wise?" he said finally, his voice rough. "You used to be the dumbest smart man I knew." Daniel laughed, a real laugh, one that came all the way up from his chest. "The night I almost died in a warehouse, I think. It clarifies things." The two brothers sat together in the deepening dark, and they did not need to say anything more. The company Daniel had helped build did not survive. How could it, with its founder convicted of 9 years of fraud, its finances a smoking ruin, its name a headline? It collapsed within the year, and Daniel felt a strange, complicated grief watching it go, because he had poured 18 years of his life into that place, and much of that work had been honest and good, even if it had been built on a foundation of another man's lies. But something unexpected happened in the wreckage. The people, his former colleagues, the engineers and draftsmen and project managers who had been just as blindsided as he was, they scattered to new firms across the state. And they did not forget Daniel Carter. They did not forget the man who had been framed and had fought back, who had testified with such quiet, unshakable dignity, who had refused to gloat even when he'd earned the right. And slowly, through those scattered connections, work found its way to Daniel's small coastal firm. Good work, honest work. From people who trusted him precisely because they had watched what happened when trust was betrayed and had seen how Daniel had carried himself through it. "You know what's strange?" Daniel said to Emily one night, going over the firm's books at the kitchen table. "Richard spent 9 years using my good name to cover his crimes. He treated my reputation like a thing to be spent. And in the end, that reputation is the only thing that survived him. The company's gone, the money's gone, he's gone. But people still trust the name Daniel Carter, because it turned out to be the one true thing in a story full of lies." Emily came and stood behind him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. "It was always true," she said. "That's why he needed it so badly. You can only frame an honest man. A liar's word is worthless. He needed you precisely because you were the real thing." She kissed the top of his head. "He spent 9 years proving how much your honesty was worth. He just thought he could steal it. He never understood it wasn't for sale." 2 years to the day, after the night everything disappeared, Daniel and Emily stood together on their beach at sunset, and Emily told him she was pregnant. Daniel wept. He was not ashamed of it. He wept the way he had wept in that hospital when he learned she was alive, great overflowing tears that came from a place too deep for words, and Emily laughed and cried at the same time, and they held each other on the cold sand while the sun went down over the water. "I was so afraid," Emily said into his chest. "For the longest time after everything, I couldn't imagine bringing a child into a world where things like that happen, where a man you trust for 9 years can plan to kill you, where anyone can reach into your life and turn it into a weapon." She pulled back and looked up at him. "But then I thought about that night, and I thought, yes, there are men like Richard in the world, but there are also men like you, and men like Ryan, and men like Reynolds and Delgado. For every person who would destroy you from a distance, there's a person who would walk into fire to save you. And I want our child to know that. I want them to know that the fire is real, but so are the people who run into it. Iyoamki sasa sawad." "They will know," Daniel said. "I'll spend my whole life making sure they know, and I'll spend my whole life being the kind of man who runs into the fire, not the man I was, the man that night made me." When the baby came, a girl, they named her Grace. And Daniel Carter, who had once been so busy staring at a screen that he did not notice his own wife drowning beside him, held his daughter in the small hours of the night and watched her sleep for hours, memorizing her face, present in a way he had not known he was capable of being for the first 42 years of his life. He kept his promise about the phone. Grace grew up in a house where her father looked up when she entered a room, where dinner was a time when devices were put away, where her parents talked to each other, and to her with a fierce, deliberate attention that other families sometimes found almost startling. She would not understand until she was much older why her father was the way he was, why he refused to let a screen come between him and the people he loved, why he told her again and again, from the time she was small, that the most important thing in the world was to look up and see the people right in front of you. But she would learn the story eventually, when she was old enough, and when she did, she would understand that her father had bought that lesson at a price most people never had to pay, and had spent the rest of his life making sure it was never wasted. Detective Reynolds retired 3 years after the trial. Daniel and Emily drove up for the small gathering his department threw for him, and afterward, the three of them, Daniel, Emily, and the gruff old detective, who had trusted his gut when every piece of evidence told him not to, sat together over coffee. "You know I almost arrested you that first night," Reynolds said. "Everything said I should. My captain wanted me to. The DA wanted me to, and I stood in your kitchen with the cuffs practically in my hand." He shook his head. 22 years, and that was the closest I ever came to putting an innocent man away. If I'd listened to the evidence instead of my gut, Richard walks free, you go to prison, and your wife's body turns up in a ditch 6 months later, and everyone believes you did it." "But you didn't," Daniel said. "You listened to your gut." "I got lucky," Reynolds said, echoing words Ryan had once used, and Daniel gave him the same answer he'd given his brother. "No," Daniel said. "You were good. And you cared enough to be good when being good was harder than being right by the book." He met the old man's eyes. "You saved 3 lives that night, Detective. Mine, Emily's, and Grace's, because she wouldn't exist if you'd made the easy choice. Every time my daughter laughs, that's partly you. Don't ever call that luck." Reynolds looked away, his jaw working, an old man unaccustomed to being thanked for the thing he'd spent his whole life quietly doing. "Take care of them," he finally said, gesturing at Emily and by extension the daughter waiting at home. "That's all the thanks I want. You take care of them and you never stop paying attention, and we'll call it even." "It's a deal," Daniel said. They never saw Richard Hayes again. He remained in prison, and as far as Daniel knew, he never wrote another letter. Every so often, over the years, Daniel would think of him, alone in a cell, growing old, and he would feel that same strange sorrow he'd felt reading the letter. Not forgiveness exactly. Daniel had made peace with the fact that he might never fully forgive, and that this was allowed, that a person was permitted to carry the weight of what had been done to them without pretending it away. But something quieter than forgiveness, an understanding, a recognition of the terrible waste of it all. Richard had been brilliant. Truly, genuinely brilliant. He could have built anything, done anything, been anything. And he had used every gift he'd been given to steal and deceive and destroy. And in the end, he had ended up with nothing, and understood too late that nothing was exactly what he had chosen every day of his life without realizing he was choosing it. Daniel, who had far fewer gifts, who was just an honest engineer who paid attention now, had ended up with everything. A wife he saw, truly saw, every single day. A daughter whose face he had memorized. A brother who was his closest friend. Work that meant something. A small house by the ocean where the fog rolled in every morning, and the people inside it loved each other out loud, without secrets, without distance, without ever again letting a screen or a schedule or a comfortable silence come between them. He thought about it sometimes, the arithmetic of it. Richard had the money and the brilliance and the power, and lost everything. Daniel had the honesty and the attention and the love, and gained everything. And the difference between them, in the end, came down to one simple thing. Richard had spent his life looking at people and seeing pieces he could move. Daniel had learned, just barely in time, to look at people and see people. That was the whole story. That was the lesson that had cost him a bullet in the shoulder and bruises on his throat and a year of nightmares. That was the truth he would spend the rest of his life living and would pass to his daughter and would carry with him to the end of his days. On the 10th anniversary of the night everything disappeared, Daniel and Emily stood on their beach again, as they had 100 times, 1,000 times, and watched the sun go down over the water. Grace was 7 now, playing in the sand a little ways off, and Ryan and Sophia and their 2 kids were coming for dinner, and the house behind them was warm and full of light. 10 years, Emily said, leaning against him. Do you ever think about how close we came? How it could have gone 100 other ways? Every day, Daniel said. And I used to think that was a curse, remembering, never being able to forget how close I came to losing you. He put his arm around her. But I don't think that anymore. I think it's the gift. Because a man who almost lost everything never stops seeing what he has. I look at you and I see you, Emily. I look at Grace and I see her. I don't take a single day for granted, not one, because I know exactly how quickly it can all disappear. Richard gave me that in a way, not on purpose, but the man who tried to destroy my life ended up teaching me how to live it. Emily turned to face him, the last light of the sun on her face, her eyes bright. You know what I remember most, she said, from that night. Not the fear, not the room, not the ropes. She took his hand. I remember hearing that footsteps in the hall and knowing you were coming and thinking, after 12 years, after everything, he's fighting. He's finally fighting for me. Her voice caught. And you never stopped. Not that night, and not for one single day since. 10 years, Daniel. 10 years of you fighting for us, paying attention, looking up, showing up. That's the man I got out of the worst night of my life, and I would go through all of it again to have him. Daniel pulled her close, and over her shoulder he watched his daughter playing in the sand, and behind them the lights of the house glowed warm against the coming dark. And somewhere on the road their family was driving toward them, and he felt his heart so full it ached. He thought about the man he used to be, the successful engineer with the beautiful house and the important dinners and the phone that ran his entire life, the man who had everything and saw none of it, the man who walked out one ordinary evening without the device that controlled him and came home to find his whole world had disappeared. That man was gone, and Daniel did not mourn him. And Daniel, because that man had been asleep, and the man standing on the beach with his wife in his arms and his daughter in his sight was awake, fully and finally awake, in a way he would never allow himself to stop being. The night Daniel Carter left his phone charging on the kitchen counter was supposed to be the beginning of a nightmare. A cruel and clever man had engineered it to be the end of everything Daniel loved. And for a few terrible days, it very nearly was. But that is not how the story ended. Because in a world where anyone can be watched, and anyone can be deceived, and anyone can be reached and manipulated and betrayed through the glowing screens that run our lives, one truth stands above all the cleverness and all the schemes and all the lies that desperate men can build. The strongest force in any life is not power. It is not money. It is not the ability to control others from a distance. It is love that shows up. It is loyalty that runs into the fire. It is the courage to look up from the screen and truly see the person standing right in front of you and to fight for them with everything you have. Richard Hayes built an empire on the belief that people could be controlled, and he lost everything. Daniel Carter learned, at the very edge of losing it all, to simply love the people in front of him out loud with his whole attention every single day. And he won. He won completely, and he won forever, and he never once looked back.